Welcome to the long night. Settle your body in whatever way feels easiest and let your shoulders drop as if you've been carrying something for too long. Take a gentle breath in and let it go slowly, like you're exhaling the entire day. You're safe here. And if you'd like to return to this calm, whenever you need deep rest, you're warmly welcome to subscribe to The Long Night. Now, let's begin. Tonight, you don't need to achieve anything. You don't need to fix yourself, improve yourself, or force your mind into silence. You don't need to solve your life before you are allowed to rest. All you need to do is arrive right here in this moment, exactly as it is. So let your breathing be simple. Let it come and go on its own. If the mind is busy, let it be busy. If the body feels restless, let it be restless. There is no mistake in what you are experiencing. Even now, even with thoughts moving, there is something quiet underneath them. Like the deep water beneath a windy lake, the surface may ripple, but the depth remains calm. Most of us have been taught to believe peace is something we must create, as if calm is a reward for doing everything correctly, as if we must work, strive, and finally earn the right to feel okay. And when the mind refuses to cooperate, we assume something is wrong with us. We think, if I could just think better, I could finally be at peace. But Zen offers a gentler possibility. What if peace is not something you manufacture, but something you uncover? Imagine clouds passing over the moon. The moon does not disappear. It is still there, quietly shining behind the moving cover of cloud. You do not need to build a new moon. You do not need to fight the clouds. You only need to remember what remains, even when you cannot see it. Zen is often called a path of subtraction, not because it takes your life away, but because it removes what is unnecessary. It invites you to notice how much of your tension comes from adding extra weight to the moment, extra stories, extra judgments, extra demands. Zen doesn't ask you to become someone else. It asks you to stop abandoning who you already are beneath the noise. And what you are in the most direct way is simply this awareness, the quiet knowing that is already listening, the space in which thoughts appear and disappear, the presence that notices a breath entering and a breath leaving. You don't need to understand this intellectually. You can feel it. Even if thoughts are loud tonight, something in you can notice they are loud. Even if your heart feels heavy, something in you can feel the heaviness without being destroyed by it. Even if you feel restless, something in you can witness restlessness. That witnessing is not a trick. It's not a performance. It's not something you have to create. It is already here, and the moment you recognize it, you begin to discover a kind of freedom. Freedom not from life, but freedom within life. Zen has a quiet way of teaching. It doesn't argue. It doesn't try to convince you with complicated theories. It points directly. It invites you to look at your experience as it is, without decoration. This is why Zen can feel so simple and yet so deep. It is not interested in giving you a new identity. It is interested in releasing you from the identities that keep you trapped. As you listen, you might notice the mind trying to turn these words into a project. It might whisper, "I should be calmer," or "I should be better at this," or "I need to get it right." If that happens, don't fight the mind. Don't scold it. Just notice. Let the thought be a passing movement, the way you would notice a leaf drifting down a river. You don't need to chase the leaf. You don't need to grab it or push it away. You simply watch it float, and you return to the breath again and again. This returning is the beginning of the practice, and it is also the beginning of rest. In Zen, there is a gentle trust in the natural mind, not the anxious mind that constantly calculates and worries, but the deeper mind that settles when it is no longer being chased. The mind is like a jar of muddy water. If you keep shaking it, the mud stays suspended and the water remains cloudy. But if you place the jar down and stop shaking it, the mud begins to settle on its own. The water becomes clear, not because you forced clarity, but because you allowed stillness. Tonight, that is what we are doing. We are placing the jar down. You will hear teachings and stories in this journey, but they are not meant to keep you awake. They are meant to guide you gently toward recognition. They are meant to help you release the habit of struggling with the moment. They are meant to show you that peace is closer than you think, not at the end of effort, but in the softening of effort. Because the mind is like a hand. When it is clenched, even a feather feels heavy. When it opens, even a stone can be held with ease. Zen practice is learning to open the hand. Not by forcing it open, but by noticing the clenching and allowing it to soften. And one of the most important things Zen reminds us is this: the practice is not separate from life. It does not belong only in temples or mountains or perfect silence. Zen lives in ordinary moments. It lives in the way you set down a cup, in the way you listen to a sound without naming it, in the way you breathe out at the end of a long day, in the way you return again and again to what is real. There is an old Zen saying that captures this spirit: before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. At first, it sounds almost disappointing, like awakening leads to nothing special. But that is the secret. Zen is not about escaping the world. It is about meeting the world without resistance. The same life, the same tasks, the same moments, yet the heart is no longer fighting them. The ordinary becomes enough because you are no longer demanding that it be extraordinary before you can rest. So tonight, we begin right here, with breath, with presence, with the simple willingness to stop running. And as we move forward, you will start to notice something. The world may not change immediately, but your relationship with the world can soften. The mind may still label, still worry, still reach and resist, but you will begin to see the tightening as it happens. And when you see it, you can release it just a little, one gentle breath at a time. For now, stay close to your breathing. Let the body be held. Let the mind move without following it, and feel even faintly the quiet space beneath it all, the stillness between thoughts. Stay with the breath for a moment longer. Feel how it arrives without effort and leaves without struggle. Even if the mind is still busy, let that be okay. Because tonight, we are not trying to silence the mind. We are learning something gentler and more useful than silence. We are learning how to stop tightening against our own experience. So much of what we call suffering is not created by life itself, but by the second layer we place on top of life. A moment happens simple and raw, and then the mind adds its commentary. It says, "This shouldn't be happening." or this must stop, or I can't handle this, or why is it like this? And right there, almost instantly, the body reacts. The chest hardens, the stomach knots, the throat narrows, the jaw clenches, the breath becomes smaller. We might not notice the sequence because it happens so quickly, but it is often the same pattern. Reality arrives, and the mind fights it, and the body becomes the battlefield. Sometimes this is obvious because the situation is heavy. Loss, fear, disappointment, uncertainty. But very often it is ordinary. A plan changes, a message is not answered, a person speaks in a tone that stings, traffic slows, the body aches in a new place. The mind wants to regain control, so it argues with what is already here. It resists the fact of the moment, as if resistance could reverse time and rewrite reality. Zen doesn't tell you to pretend everything is fine. It doesn't ask you to put a peaceful mask on your face. And it doesn't insist that spiritual people never feel pain. Zen simply asks you to look closely at the exact point where pain becomes suffering. It invites you to notice the extra layer, the clenching, the demand, the refusal, and to see how much energy it costs you to live at war with the present. And this is where something hopeful appears. Because if suffering is partly created by tightening, then relief is partly created by softening. You don't have to solve everything at once. You don't have to force your life into perfection. You only need to notice the grip and loosen it by a single degree. Imagine holding your fist clenched for a whole day. At first, you might not even realize it is clenched. It feels normal, like it is simply how you are. But slowly, pain grows in the muscles. Fatigue spreads into the arm. And then, when you finally open the hand, you realize something simple. The pain was not only caused by what you were holding, it was caused by how tightly you were holding it. This is the quiet wisdom Zen keeps returning to. Not controlling life, but releasing your grip on life. A great deal of our tightening comes from attachment. Not attachment in the sense of love, warmth, or connection, but attachment in the sense of needing reality to obey our preferences. We lean toward what we want and pull away from what we don't want. We try to secure pleasure control, uncertainty, avoid discomfort, and lock life into a predictable shape. The mind believes this will protect us, but often it only makes us exhausted. Because life does not stay locked. Conditions change, moods change, people change, bodies change, time changes everything. And if we make peace dependent on perfect conditions, we will keep missing peace as conditions keep moving. Zen does not ask you to stop wanting. It asks you to stop turning desire into a contract with reality. Reality does not sign contracts. Reality moves like weather. And when you stop fighting the weather, something inside you relaxes. Not because the storm disappears, but because you stop adding a second storm inside yourself. This is why Zen practice places so much emphasis on simple awareness, and why it returns again and again to Zazen. Zazen is not a performance. It is not a search for a special state. It is the practice of meeting what is already here, without trying to rearrange it into something else. In Zazen, you sit and feel the breath. You feel the body being held by the earth. You notice sounds coming and going. You notice thoughts rising and falling. And the most important part is not whether the mind becomes quiet. The most important part is that you learn how to return. Because the mind will wander, it will plan, it will replay, It will judge. It will bring up old memories and future worries. That is what minds do. But each time you notice you have wandered, you have found the practice. You return, not angrily, not with disappointment. You return gently, as if guiding something tired back home. You return to the breath. You return to the body. You return to the simple present. And as you return again and again, you begin to see something. Clearly, thoughts are not commands. They are events. They are movements. They come, they change, they pass. The more you stop treating each thought as an order you must obey, the more the mind begins to soften by itself. It can help to picture thoughts like leaves floating down a river. A leaf appears drifting on the surface. It spins slowly, catches in an eddy, then moves on. You don't need to jump into the river to chase it. You don't need to build a raft and follow it downstream. You simply watch it pass, and you remain on the bank, breathing steady present. This is not suppression. This is freedom. It is the freedom of not being dragged. And when you stop being dragged, something else becomes possible acceptance. Not resignation, not giving up, but a quiet, honest willingness to be with reality as it is without adding war to it. Acceptance does not mean you approve of everything. It means you stop exhausting yourself by insisting the present should not be present. It means you stop arguing with the fact of now. So tonight, if you notice tension, don't scold it. Just notice it. Feel it as sensation. Where is it in the body? Is it in the chest, the throat, the jaw, the belly? Does it have a shape? Does it move when you breathe? And then on the out-breath, let the body soften by one small degree, as if you are loosening a knot in a rope strand by strand. You do not need to fix the knot all at once. You only need to stop pulling it tighter. If an emotion is here tonight, sadness, anxiety, loneliness, allow it to be here. Let it sit beside you like a guest in a quiet room. You don't need to entertain it. You don't need to push it away. You only need to stop wrestling with it because wrestling makes it stronger. Stillness makes it honest. And honesty is what heals. As you breathe, you may start to feel a subtle shift, a little more space around experience, a little less urgency to make everything different, a little less tightening. And in that space, you begin to see something that will matter deeply in the next part. You begin to see how quickly the mind labels everything, good, bad, success, failure, before the story has even finished unfolding. Those labels can feel final, but life keeps moving. And when you loosen the labels, peace has room to enter. For now, stay close to the breath. Let the body be supported. Let the mind move without chasing it. And let the simplest practice be enough. Notice the tightening and soften. Notice the demand and release. Return to what is real. One gentle breath at a time. As the tightening softens, the mind becomes clearer, and you begin to notice something simple but powerful. The mind is constantly labeling life. It wants to decide quickly. It wants to place each moment into a category that feels manageable, good or bad, right or wrong, success or failure, safe or dangerous. And once the label is applied, the mind behaves as if the label is the truth. If a moment is labeled good, the mind clings and tries to hold it in place. If a moment is labeled bad, the mind resists and tries to push it away. If a moment is labeled uncertain, the mind worries and tries to predict the future. In this way, so much of our suffering is not created by the moment itself, but by how firmly we believe our label about the moment. Zen does not ask you to stop thinking. It asks you to see thinking clearly. It asks you to notice how quickly the mind turns life into a verdict. And once you see that habit, you can begin to loosen it. You can begin to hold your judgments more lightly, not because you are indifferent, but because you are honest enough to admit that you cannot see the whole story from a single frame. This is part of why Zen uses koans. A koan is not a riddle meant to be solved like a math problem. It is a doorway meant to be entered with direct experience. One famous koan asks, "What is the sound of one hand clapping?" The mind immediately tries to answer. It searches for something clever. It wants to win. But the koan refuses to be captured by ordinary logic, and so the mind's grip begins to loosen. When the mind cannot grasp, something else becomes possible. A spacious awareness appears, quiet, open, not needing to decide so quickly. And Zen offers another way to loosen the grip, a simple story that has been told for generations, because it points to the same wisdom in the language of ordinary life. In a small village near a stretch of farmland, there lived a man named Chiang. He was not famous, and he did not try to appear wise. He lived plainly close to seasons and soil, meeting each day the way it came. One morning he woke and discovered that his horse was gone. The gate to the stable had loosened in the night, and the animal had wandered away. When the neighbors heard, they came over immediately. A woman named Mrs. Lin stood near the front, shaking her head with sympathy. "How terrible," she said. "This is very bad luck." To the neighbors, the story was already complete. Horse gone meant only one thing: loss, misfortune, bad. Chiang looked at the empty stable and nodded slowly. He did not deny the reality. He did not pretend it was pleasant, but he also did not seal the moment with a final verdict. He simply said, "Maybe." The neighbors did not know what to do with that word. Maybe felt too open. Maybe felt like refusing to agree with what was obvious. But Chiang was not refusing. He was leaving space. He was allowing life to remain unfinished. A few days later, the horse returned, and it did not return alone. It came back with several wild horses, following behind it, drawn by instinct and familiarity. Suddenly, what looked like misfortune looked like an unexpected gift. The neighbors hurried over again, amazed, their voices bright. Mrs. Lin smiled wide. "How wonderful," she said. "This is very good luck." Chiang looked at the horses gathered near his fence, calm as ever, and he said again, "Maybe." Now the neighbors laughed, not unkindly, but with confusion. To them, this was clearly good. Why wouldn't he claim it? Why wouldn't he celebrate it as a win? But Chiang still would not close the story. Soon after, Chiang's son, Wei, tried to ride one of the wild horses to train it. The animal bucked hard and sudden. Wei fell and his leg broke badly. The neighbors came again, their faces heavy now. Mrs. Lin sighed and said, "How awful. This is very bad." The story seemed complete once more. Gift becomes injury. Good becomes bad. The label flipped and the mind felt certain again. Chiang sat beside his son, helping him drink water, helping him rest, looking at the swollen leg. And again, he said softly, "Maybe." It was not that he did not care. It was not that he felt no pain. It was that he refused to pretend he knew how the story would unfold. Not long after soldiers arrived in the village, a war had begun and the army was taking young men to fight. They went from house to house selecting sons and pulling them away from families. Panic spread through the village. But when the soldiers came to Chang's home, they saw Wei's broken leg and could not take him. They moved on. After the soldiers left, the neighbors returned, stunned. Mrs. Lin's eyes were wide, her voice trembling with relief. "How fortunate," she said. "This is very good." And Chang, looking at his son still alive, still at home, said one more time, "Maybe." The story is simple, but the teaching is deep. It is not telling you to be passive. It is not telling you to stop caring. It is showing you how quickly the mind decides what something means and how often it is wrong, because it cannot see the full unfolding of causes and consequences. We label too soon, and we suffer too soon. We celebrate too soon, then cling. We despair too soon, then resist. We tighten around a moment that has not finished becoming what it will become. And tonight, you may notice where this happens in your own life. Perhaps you label your past. That ruined everything. That was a mistake. That was the only good time. Perhaps you label your present. This is not enough. This is too much. I should be further along. Perhaps you label your feelings. This anxiety is bad. This sadness shouldn't be here. This restlessness must stop. Each label carries a verdict, and each verdict creates tightening. So for now, you don't need to force the mind to stop labeling. You only need to loosen your belief in the label. You can replace the harsh verdict with a softer truth. Not good or bad, but this is here. Not I can't handle this, but I can feel this. Not it must be different, but maybe. Maybe there is more to this moment than you can see. Maybe the story is still unfolding. Maybe you can soften your grip and let the next breath arrive. So breathe in gently and breathe out slowly. Feel how the body can soften when it stops insisting. Feel how the mind can relax when it stops rushing to decide. This is not weakness. This is wisdom. It is the wisdom of leaving space for life to unfold without strangling it with certainty. And as we move forward, this spaciousness becomes the foundation for the heart of Zen practice, sitting with what is again and again until you discover what remains when you stop chasing the mind. For now, rest in the breath and let the word maybe be a small open door in your chest, a quiet permission to stop deciding so quickly and simply be here. If you let the word maybe settle in the background of your mind, you may notice something subtle. The moment becomes less crowded. Not because life suddenly became easy, and not because your thoughts vanished, but because you stopped insisting that you already know what everything means. You gave reality a little room to breathe. This is the spirit Zen brings into its most central practice, Zazen, which is simply sitting. Zazen is not a performance. It is not a technique for forcing the mind to behave. It is not a way of manufacturing a special mood or chasing a spiritual high. It is the quiet discipline of meeting your experience as it is without adding extra struggle. It is the practice of staying close to reality, breath, body, sound, sensation, and learning to rest in awareness even when the mind is busy. In the beginning, many people sit down to meditate with an invisible contract. They don't always realize it, but the contract is there. It says, if I sit long enough, I should feel calm. If I do it right, my mind should go quiet. If the thoughts keep coming, something is wrong. And then the mind does what minds do. It thinks, remembers, worries, plans, and the person feels defeated. Zen offers a gentler understanding. The thoughts are not the problem. The problem is the tug. The problem is being pulled. Zazen is the training of not being pulled. So you sit and you feel the breath. You don't need to control it. You simply stay close to it the way you might stay close to the sound of rain at night, letting it be steady in the background. Thoughts will appear because a mind produces thoughts the way lungs produce breath. When you notice you've been carried away, you return. You return without anger. You return without disappointment. You return as if you're guiding yourself back to bed after a bad dream. This returning is everything. It is the heart of the practice. Each return is a small act of freedom. Each return is you choosing the present over the story. Over time, something becomes clear, not as an idea, but as a lived experience. You are not your thoughts. Thoughts happen, and you are aware of them. You are not your emotions. Emotions move, and you are aware of them. You are not even the tension itself. You can feel tension and soften. Awareness is wider than all of it, and it is already here. And when you discover that you begin to loosen the grip around what you call me, this is where Zen becomes very deep, very quietly. Because so much of suffering is not only about what happens in life, but about the self we believe everything is happening to, the self we defend, the self we compare, the self we try to perfect, the self we fear will not be enough, the self that is always checking, always measuring, always wondering, am I safe? Am I winning? Am I loved? Am I okay? When you sit in stillness, you begin to observe this self more clearly. You watch the mind say I again and again. You watch it build stories about who you are, what you should be, what you must fix, what you must avoid. You watch it replay the past and rehearse the future as if controlling the story will keep you safe. But the more closely you look, the more you notice something surprising. The self is not one solid thing. It is a changing stream. One moment confident, the next uncertain. One moment kind, the next defensive. One moment calm, the next restless. Opinions rise and fall. Moods shift. Identity changes with context. Even the feeling of me has different textures throughout the day. So Zen doesn't try to destroy the self. It simply invites you to see it clearly, so you stop gripping it as if it were permanent. A Zen master named Dogen expressed this in a few lines that have stayed with practitioners for centuries. He said, in essence, that to study the way is to study the self, and to study the self is to forget the self, and to forget the self is to be illuminated by all things. You don't have to understand those lines with your thinking mind. You can feel them through practice. When you study the self in Zazen, you observe it without feeding it. You see it arise and pass, and as you see it, you begin to forget it, not by erasing your personality, not by becoming cold or blank, but by relaxing the obsession with self-reference. You stop making everything about me. You stop treating every thought as a personal emergency. And when that obsession softens, something opens. The world becomes brighter, not because the world changed, but because you are no longer trapped inside the small room of self-concern. You begin to notice life directly again. The texture of sound, the softness of breath, the warmth in the body, the quiet presence of the room, the simple fact of being alive in this moment. Zen sometimes points toward this direct presence with a phrase that sounds mysterious. At first, your original face, the face you had before your parents were born. It doesn't mean a literal face. It points to the awareness that exists before naming, before judging, before me and mine. The clear, simple knowing that is here, even when the mind is complicated. If you listen closely right now, you may sense it. Before the next thought appears, there is a small open space. Before the mind says anything about this moment, the moment is simply here. That quiet presence is not something you have to create. It is what remains when you stop chasing after thoughts and stop fighting them. It is what remains when you rest. And this is why Zen does not treat meditation as a way of becoming special. The more you chase special experiences, the more you subtly reject the present, and the more you create tension. Zazen is the practice of not rejecting. It is the practice of staying. So tonight, let sitting be very simple in your imagination. Even if you are lying down, the spirit is the same. Let the breath be steady. Let thoughts come and go like birds crossing the sky. You don't need to shoot the birds. You don't need to build a cage. You simply watch them pass and you return to the open sky itself. If the mind says I'm doing it wrong, notice the thought and return. If the mind says I'm not calm, notice it and return. If restlessness rises in the body, feel it as energy and return. Not harshly, not forcefully, with patience, with kindness, again and again. This is not a quick trick. It is a gentle retraining of the whole system. And slowly, the practice begins to show you something larger than your personal story. It begins to show you that everything you experience arises, changes, and passes. Thoughts, sensations, feelings, identities, all of it moving like weather across the open field of awareness. And when you begin to trust that movement, a deeper insight naturally appears, like a dawn arriving without being pushed. You start to sense the way form and emptiness belong together, the way the wave is never separate from the ocean. You start to feel, not just think, that nothing is as solid as it seems, and yet everything is fully here. For now, just stay close to the breath and let awareness be what it already is, quiet, present, and wide enough to hold the whole night. As you stay close to the breath, you may begin to sense a gentle spaciousness around your experience. Thoughts still come, sensations still shift, feelings still rise and fall, but there is more room. And in that room, Zen offers one of its deepest insights, an insight that sounds philosophical at first, but becomes profoundly comforting when it is felt directly. This is the teaching of emptiness. The word can be misunderstood. It can sound cold like a void. But in Zen and Buddhism, emptiness is not a dark nothingness. It is a description of how things truly exist. It means that nothing is fixed, separate, or permanent in the way the mind imagines. Everything arises through conditions. Everything depends on other things. Everything changes. And because it changes, you do not have to cling as if it must stay the same. There is a line from the Heart Sutra that Zen returns to again and again. Form is emptiness, and emptiness is form. You don't need to solve that line like a puzzle. You can let it soften you. Form is everything you can point to your body, your thoughts, your feelings, the room around you, the night outside. Emptiness is not the opposite of these things. It is their true nature. It is the fact that they do not exist as solid, unchanging objects. They are movement, relationship change. When you see this, something in the nervous system can finally relax. Because so much fear is born from one impossible demand, the demand that life be stable. We want guarantees. We want certainty. We want to hold what we love in place forever. We want our bodies to stay young, our relationships to stay safe, our moods to stay pleasant, our future, to stay predictable. And when life changes, as it always does, we feel personally threatened, as if reality has betrayed us. Zen offers a different kind of safety. Not the safety of control, but the safety of understanding. When you understand change is not an accident, you stop feeling attacked by it. You begin to move with life rather than against it. A simple image can bring this teaching close. Imagine a wave on the ocean. A wave rises, and for a moment, it has a clear shape. You can point to it and say, "That is a wave." It seems separate. It seems like a thing. And then it falls. Where did it go? It didn't disappear into nothing. It simply returned to what it always was. Ocean. The wave was never separate from the ocean. It was ocean temporarily appearing as a wave. This is what Zen means by form and emptiness. The wave has form. It has height-shape movement. And the wave is empty of separate existence. It is not a fixed, independent object. It is ocean in motion. Now bring that image into your own experience. Thoughts are like waves. Feelings are like waves. Moods are like waves. Even the sense of me that rises and falls throughout the day is like a wave. Sometimes you feel confident, then later uncertain. Sometimes peaceful, then later anxious. Sometimes open, then later defensive. The self changes its shape again and again, often without you noticing. When you believe each wave is your identity, you suffer. Because waves cannot stay high forever. When you cling to a pleasant wave, you fear its ending. When you resist an unpleasant wave, you create extra struggle. But when you remember you are not only the wave, you are also the ocean beneath it, something steadies. The ocean can hold every wave. The ocean does not panic when the surface becomes rough. It allows the waves to move without becoming the waves. That does not mean the ocean is numb. It means the ocean is vast. Tonight, you can practice this gently. A thought arises. You notice it. In noticing it, you are already wider than it. A feeling arises. Sadness, worry, restlessness. You notice it. In noticing it, you are already holding it. Nothing needs to be forced away. Nothing needs to be fixed immediately. You are simply recognizing the truth. Experience arises, changes, and passes. This matters because the mind often makes a painful mistake. It takes a temporary experience and turns it into a permanent sentence. I will always feel this way. This will never change. I will never be okay. These sentences are heavy because they treat a wave as if it were the whole ocean. But if you look honestly, you will see that emotions always change shape. Even grief changes its texture. Even fear has shifts in intensity. Even the heaviest sadness has moments where the breath comes a little easier. The wave rises, the wave falls, and beneath it, something remains. Zen does not ask you to deny form. You still feel what you feel. You still live in a body. You still experience pain and pleasure, fatigue, and comfort, hope, and disappointment. That is form. But Zen also asks you to recognize emptiness, not as an idea, but as a relief. The relief of knowing that what you feel right now is not a prison. The relief of knowing that nothing is fixed in the way fear tells you it is. When you hold form and emptiness together, you become more tender, not less. You begin to love without trying to possess. You begin to appreciate without trying to freeze. You begin to meet the moment fully because you are no longer demanding it last forever. This is why the Heart Sutra is not meant to be cold. It is meant to be liberating. Form is emptiness means the thing you fear is not as solid as it appears. Emptiness's form means this moment still matters. This breath matters. This life matters. Not because it will never change, but because it is alive right now. So tonight you can let your experience be exactly what it is. If there is comfort, let it be here. If there is discomfort, let it be here. If thoughts are gentle, let them be gentle. If thoughts are busy, let them be busy. You do not have to panic. You do not have to clamp down. You do not have to demand a different wave. Just keep returning to the depth. Keep remembering the ocean. And as this understanding settles, Zen offers another teaching, one that sounds sharp on the surface, but points to the same freedom. A teaching about heat and cold, about comfort and discomfort, and about the end of struggle. Because when you stop insisting that conditions must be perfect, you begin to discover a steadiness that does not depend on the weather of the mind. For now, stay close to the breath and let each wave pass naturally as if it knows where it is going. You are not required to hold it up. You are allowed to rest in the depth that can hold it all. As you rest in the feeling of waves and ocean, something becomes clearer without needing to be explained. Too much. Life is movement. Experience rises, changes, passes, and returns. The mind suffers when it demands that movement stop, when it tries to freeze what cannot be frozen. And this is why Zen sometimes offers teachings that sound almost blunt, because they cut straight through the habit of arguing with reality. There is an old Zen saying, if you're hot, you die. If you're cold, you die. At first it can sound harsh, even strange, as if Zen is trying to shock you. But it isn't cruelty, it's clarity. It's pointing to the way we spend so much of life trying to arrange perfect conditions so we can finally relax, as if peace is something waiting at the end of control. We chase comfort and we fear discomfort. We chase warmth and we fear cold. We chase certainty and we fear change. And when life refuses to cooperate, we tighten, we complain, we struggle. The teaching is not about temperature, it's about preference, and the suffering created when preference becomes a demand. The mind often says quietly, I can only be okay if things feel a certain way, if the room is quiet enough, if the body feels light enough, if the future looks safe enough, if people treat me the way I want, if my emotions stay pleasant, then I can rest. But life does not promise that. Life shifts. The room changes. The body changes. The future changes. People change. And when peace depends on conditions, peace becomes fragile. It becomes something you keep losing. Zen offers a different kind of peace, one that doesn't require life to stop moving. It offers the peace of seeing clearly that conditions will always change, and that you can still remain steady inside changing conditions. This is not passivity, it's resilience. It's a quiet freedom that is deeper than comfort. Think again of the ocean. On the surface, storms come and go. The waves rise, the wind turns the water rough, and everything looks unsettled. But beneath the surface, the ocean remains deep and still. The storm doesn't reach the bottom. The depth holds the whole event without being thrown around by it. Zen is inviting you into that depth, not by removing storms from your life, but by helping you stop adding an extra storm inside yourself. Because often, the pain itself is not what destroys us. It is the struggle layered on top of pain. It is the mind saying, "This shouldn't be here," and then tightening every muscle to push reality away. It is the mind saying, "I can't handle this," and then making the feeling larger through fear. It is the mind turning discomfort into a personal threat and turning a passing wave into a permanent sentence. The body can feel heat. The body can feel cold. The body can feel tired, restless, heavy, uncertain. But the mind doesn't have to turn those sensations into war. Zen practice is learning the difference between the first arrow and the second. The first arrow is the basic discomfort that comes with being human. The second arrow is the one we shoot into ourselves by resisting, by panicking, by demanding the moment becomes something else. When Zen says, if you're hot, you die. If you're cold, you die. It's quietly asking you to stop building your peace on something as unstable as the weather of experience. Because if your peace depends on always being comfortable, you will always be chasing and you will always be tense. And tension itself becomes a kind of suffering you carry everywhere. So tonight, practice something small and very real. When you notice discomfort, physical or emotional, see if you can meet it as sensation first, before the mind rushes to explain it. Where is it in the body? What is its texture? Is it tight or dull? Heavy or buzzing warm or cool? Does it stay still or does it shift when you breathe? This changes everything, because sensation is often simpler than the story about sensation. Anxiety, for example, can become 1,000 thoughts about the future, but in the body, it may be a flutter in the belly, a pressure in the chest, a restless energy in the limbs. When you meet sensation directly, you stop feeding the story. You stop pouring fuel on the fire. And the nervous system begins to settle, not because you forced it, but because you stopped escalating it. This is not a trick for making feelings disappear. It is training in staying present without collapsing. It is learning you can feel heat without panicking. You can feel cold without despairing. You can feel restlessness without needing to escape. You can be uncomfortable and still be safe. You can be uncertain and still be okay. Zen does not ask you to like discomfort. It only asks you to stop treating discomfort as an enemy that must be eliminated before you're allowed to rest. The mind's war is exhausting. Many people are not tired because life is too hard. They are tired because they are fighting life in every moment, fighting their own feelings, fighting their own thoughts, fighting the fact that things change. So the practice is very simple. Notice the fight and soften it. When you catch the mind saying this shouldn't be happening, you can answer softly, not with argument, but with a quiet return. This is what is here. When you catch the mind saying, I can't handle this, you can answer with one honest breath. I can feel this. When you catch the mind clenching, you can loosen the jaw, drop the shoulders, and let the exhale lengthen, as if the body is learning it does not have to brace for impact. And each time you do this, you are choosing the depth over the surface. You are choosing the ocean over the wave. You are refusing to add the second arrow. This is where Zen becomes profoundly practical. It doesn't promise a life without heat and cold. It doesn't promise a life without discomfort. It offers something steadier, a mind that can hold changing conditions without being owned by them. And when that steadiness begins to appear, a natural question follows. How do you bring this into daily life? How do you carry this depth through ordinary moments, through uncertainty, through relationships, through work, through the small frictions that usually trigger old reactions? The answer is mindfulness. Mindfulness is the lived version of this teaching. It is the ability to stay with what is happening without tightening into war. It is awareness that notices the first arrow and refuses to shoot the second. It is relaxed attention, steady and kind, returning you to the ground beneath your feet again and again. So for now, let the body settle. Let the breath be slow and honest. Let the mind move without being followed. Warm or cool, comfortable or uncomfortable, quiet or busy, everything can be included. Nothing needs to be pushed away. And as you breathe, feel the simple relief of not fighting. Feel what happens when you stop arguing with the moment and allow it to be exactly as it is. That relief is not weakness. It is the beginning of freedom. In the next part, we will move gently into mindfulness as a daily strength, how this calm clarity becomes something you can return to whenever life feels uncertain, and how it grows each time you come back. For now, stay with the breath and rest in the depth that is already here. As you rest in that relief, the relief of not fighting the moment, you may begin to sense what Zen is really offering. It is not a perfect life and not a perfectly quiet mind. It is something more dependable than that. It is a steady way of being with life, even when life is uncertain. And one of the simplest names for that steadiness is mindfulness. Mindfulness is often spoken about as if it were another task to do correctly, another skill to master, another way to become better. But true mindfulness is much softer than our striving mind imagines. Mindfulness is simply the ability to be here without being carried away. It is awareness staying close to what is real, even while the mind continues to produce thoughts. It is the quiet knowing of breath, moving in the body of sound, arriving and fading of sensation, shifting of emotion, rising and passing, without turning any of it into an emergency. When mindfulness is present, you do not need to eliminate difficulty in order to find peace. You can meet difficulty with space, and that space changes everything. Because without space, we react automatically. A feeling appears, and we tighten. A fear arises, and we rush to control the future. A disappointment lands, and we build a story about what it means. A small friction happens, and we defend ourselves before we even know we're defending. The body becomes braced, the breath becomes shallow, and the mind becomes fast, as if speed could protect us. Mindfulness does not remove what happens. It changes how you meet what happens. It gives you a pause, just wide enough to breathe. And in that pause, you regain choice. You can feel a strong emotion without obeying it. You can experience discomfort without making it into war. You can be uncertain without collapsing into panic. This becomes especially important in the places where the mind struggles most: the unknown, the unfinished, the uncontrollable. Uncertainty is where the mind tends to spin stories. It tries to predict the future as if prediction could guarantee safety. It searches for signs, rehearses worst-case scenarios, and presses you to solve tomorrow right now. The body responds as if those imagined futures are already happening, and you feel it as a tight chest, a restless belly, a racing mind that will not slow down. Mindfulness interrupts this, not with force, but with return. It returns you to what is actually here. Not the story, but the breath. Not the imagined outcome, but the body. Not the future, but this moment. And this is why mindfulness is sometimes described as returning to the ground. Not a philosophical ground, but a felt ground. The simple reality beneath your thoughts, beneath your fears, beneath your hopes. When you return to that ground, the nervous system begins to settle. Not because you commanded it, but because you stopped feeding the spiral. To support mindfulness, Zen offers a companion teaching that is both simple and transformative beginner's mind. Beginner's mind means meeting the moment without the heavy certainty of "I already know." It is not childish. It is awake. It is the mind that can encounter a breath as if it matters a sound, as if it is new, a small, ordinary sensation, as if it deserves full attention. The mind loves familiarity because familiarity feels safe, but familiarity also makes us numb. We stop noticing what is here. We stop tasting our life. We live in assumptions and routines, and then we wonder why we feel far away from ourselves. Beginner's mind brings you back gently. It invites you to experience rather than conclude. It invites you to listen rather than label. It invites you to feel what is actually happening instead of what you think should be happening. And in this way, beginner's mind is not a cute attitude. It is a doorway to real peace because it loosens the mind's tight grip on certainty. There is a simple image that helps this land. Imagine walking on ice. If you tense every muscle, if you panic and stiffen, you are more likely to slip. But if you soften, if you stay aware of your footing, if you move gently and feel each step, you become steadier. Life is like this. The more you tense against uncertainty, the more unstable you feel. The more you soften into awareness, the more balanced you become. Mindfulness is not rigid attention. It is relaxed attention. It is a steady, gentle presence that does not squeeze life and does not abandon life. Tonight, you may notice how quickly the mind wanders. It might drift to unfinished tasks, to conversations, to worries about tomorrow, to old memories, to small regrets. That wandering is not failure. It is simply the mind doing what minds do. The practice is not to stop wandering forever. The practice is to return without harshness. Mindfulness is not measured by how rarely you wander. It is shaped by how kindly you return. Zen often suggests you treat this training the way you would treat a small puppy. A puppy runs off constantly. It is not misbehaving. It is being a puppy. You don't punish it with anger. You don't shame it for wandering. You simply notice and guide it back again and again with patience. And over time, the puppy learns. It learns not through fear, but through repetition and gentleness. So if you notice the mind wandering tonight, you can acknowledge it softly. You might whisper inwardly, thinking, and then return to the breath. If you notice planning and return. If you notice self-criticism, judging and return. Nothing dramatic is required. This is not a battle. It is a simple homecoming. Each return is a small act of freedom, a small reminder that you are not obligated to follow every thought. And as you practice returning, you begin to build something that will support you far beyond tonight. You build a pause. You build a space. You build a new reflex where awareness arrives before reaction. You start to feel little by little that you can meet your inner weather without being owned by it. You can be sad and still be gentle. You can be anxious and still breathe. You can be uncertain and still be present. You can be tired and still be kind to yourself. This is why mindfulness is strength without tension. It is strength because it gives you steadiness. It is without tension because it does not come from forcing. It comes from returning. It comes from relaxing the grip. It comes from learning that peace is not something you clutch. It is something you allow. And perhaps the most comforting part is this: mindfulness does not require you to become someone else. It meets you exactly where you are, even if you feel messy, even if you feel far from calm, even if the mind is loud. Because the moment you notice the mind is loud, awareness is already present. That noticing is already the practice. That noticing is already the lantern in the dark. So let mindfulness be simple tonight. Let it be a quiet companionship with your experience. Feel the breath moving and know it is moving. Feel the body resting and know it is resting. Let sounds come and go without chasing them. Let thoughts come and go without climbing into them. Let feelings rise and fall without demanding they disappear. And as this becomes natural, Zen will point you towards something even simpler than technique: wholehearted presence in ordinary life. Presence so complete that it does not need to announce itself. Presence that can be found in the smallest actions, like eating, like washing a bowl, like doing one thing fully without splitting yourself into 1,000 pieces. So stay with the breath now softly, and let the mind settle into the present, the way a tired body settles into bed. And when you feel ready, we will move into an ordinary Zen moment that reveals what mindfulness looks like when it becomes effortless, when it becomes as simple as this: when you eat, you just eat. Part 8. When I eat smooth prose for 11 labs, approximately 1,000 words. As mindfulness becomes more familiar, practice starts to feel less like something you do in order to change yourself and more like a way of being with your life. It becomes quieter, simpler, almost ordinary. And Zen loves this ordinariness because Zen is not trying to pull you away from life. It is trying to bring you fully into it. There is a small story told in many Zen communities, not because it is dramatic, but because it points to something essential. A young monk named Jin had been practicing for some time. He had listened to teachings, read books, and tried to understand what awakening meant. Yet something still felt missing. The words were beautiful, but they remained in his head like furniture he could not use. He felt as if Zen was always hinting at a treasure, but he could never quite touch it. One evening, Jin found his teacher, Roshi Aikan, sitting down for a simple meal. The monastery dining hall was quiet. Bowls were set out. Steam rose gently from the food. The teacher moved without hurry, as if the whole world had narrowed into one calm, ordinary act. He lifted his bowl, took a bite, and chewed slowly, not performing, not trying to look holy, simply eating. Jin waited, respectful, and then asked the question that had been burning in him. "Roshi," he said softly, "what is Zen?" The teacher did not answer right away. He kept eating. He took another small bite, chewed, swallowed, and then looked at Jin with kind, steady eyes. "When I eat," he said, "I eat." Jin blinked. At first, he felt disappointed. He wanted something more complex, something he could hold in his mind and carry away as an explanation. "When I eat," sounded too plain, too obvious, almost useless. And yet something in the teacher's presence made it difficult to dismiss. The Roshi's attention had not been split. He was not eating while thinking about the next task, the next conversation, the next worry. He was not living in two places at once. He was here fully, eating, hearing, breathing, being. Jin asked again, trying to find the hidden meaning. "But Roshi, everyone eats. What makes this Zen? The teacher's expression softened as if he had heard this question many times before. Most people eat, he said gently, and they are everywhere else. They chew while they worry. They swallow while they plan. They taste while they replay the past. They finish a meal without ever meeting it. They live in 1,000 fragments, and then they wonder why they feel tired. Jin sat quietly listening. The Roshi continued. Zen is not the act itself. Zen is the wholeness of the mind that meets the act. When you eat, just eat. When you walk, just walk. When you wash, just wash. Do not divide your life into pieces and then ask why it feels scattered. This is what mindfulness grows into, not a tight concentration that feels like strain, but a wholehearted presence that feels like ease. A mind that is no longer constantly leaning into the future or dragging the past behind it. A mind that can be with one thing at a time without rushing to escape it. And this matters more than we realize, because fragmentation is one of the deepest sources of modern exhaustion. We do one thing while thinking of 5 other things. We listen while composing our reply. We rest while scrolling. We breathe while worrying. The body is in one place, but the mind is somewhere else, and the heart is pulled between them. Over time, this becomes a quiet kind of suffering, not dramatic pain, but a constant sense of being incomplete, scattered, and never fully here. Zen offers an antidote that is almost too simple to believe. It says, stop dividing your attention. Return to one thing. Not because one thing is all that exists, but because wholeness is how the mind heals. You can feel this directly even now. As you listen, you can notice the breath. You can notice the feeling of being supported. You can notice the way the mind tries to drift. And you can gently return, not with force, but with warmth, as if you are bringing yourself back to a place where you can finally rest. Wholehearted presence does not mean you never think ahead. It does not mean you stop planning or stop remembering. It means you see clearly when planning becomes worry and when remembering becomes rumination. It means you choose again and again to return to what is actually happening, because what is actually happening is where your life is. And there is something even deeper here. When you are fully present, the sense of separation softens. You stop experiencing yourself as a small, anxious person struggling inside a hostile world. You begin to experience yourself as part of the moment breath and sound body and space awareness and life. The boundaries become less rigid and the heart naturally becomes calmer. Not because you forced calm, but because you stopped being split. This is why Zen emphasizes ordinary actions. A single meal becomes practice. A single breath becomes practice. The simple movement of a hand becomes practice. Not because these things are magical, but because they bring you back to the only place you can ever truly be here. And now, let this story become personal in a gentle way. Think of a moment in your day when you are most fragmented. Perhaps it is when you eat while looking at a screen. Perhaps it is when you walk while thinking of work. Perhaps it is when you lie down at night while rehearsing tomorrow. In those moments, you can try the smallest shift. You can choose one thing to meet fully, one bite, one step, one breath, one exhale. And in that one thing, you will find a quiet steadiness that feels like coming home. Zen is not asking you to add more tasks. It is asking you to remove the unnecessary splitting. It is asking you to be where you already are. So tonight, as you move towards sleep, Let your practice be very simple. When you breathe in, just breathe in. When you breathe out, just breathe out. Let the mind wander if it wanders, and then return gently, as if you are guiding yourself back into the present with kindness. You do not need to force anything. You only need to stop dividing. And as this becomes more natural, you begin to see something important. Zen does not belong only to meditation. It belongs to daily life. It belongs to the smallest tasks, the ones you usually rush through without noticing. And in the next part, we will move into that ordinary world more clearly, stepping into a Zen teaching that turns simple tasks into a path presence, in washing the bowl, in sweeping the floor, in the quiet rhythm of the everyday. For now, rest with this one simple sentence and let it soften the mind the way warm water softens tight hands. When I breathe, I breathe. When I rest, and when I sleep, I sleep. When the mind begins to taste wholehearted presence, it naturally starts to see how much of life has been lived on autopilot. We hurry through ordinary moments as if they do not matter, as if the real life is somewhere else later, after the work is done, after the problems are solved, after the mind finally becomes quiet. Zen gently turns you back and says the real life is here. And if you can meet the ordinary with presence, you will stop waiting for peace as if it were a future reward. There is another small Zen moment that expresses this with great simplicity. A monk once approached his teacher, Roshi Aiken, after a meal. The monk had been listening to teachings about awakening and wanted something clear, something he could hold on to. What is the path, he asked, as if there must be one special instruction that would unlock everything. The teacher looked at him calmly and asked a simple question instead. Have you eaten? Yes, the monk replied. Then the teacher said, wash your bowl. At first, that can sound like avoidance, like the teacher is refusing to answer. But Zen is doing something very precise here. It is pointing out that the mind keeps looking for some extraordinary moment, some hidden key, while ignoring the direct reality of what is right in front of it. The monk wanted a teaching to think about. The teacher gave him a task to do, not as a distraction, but as the teaching itself. Wash your bowl. In other words, return to the moment you are actually in. Don't make your life a staircase leading to a future you believe will finally be calm. Don't treat the present like a hallway you rush through. Meet this moment fully, because this moment is where the mind can wake up. Zen practice is not separate from what you do each day. It is embedded inside what you do. It lives in the way you place a cup down rather than dropping it. It lives in the way you open a door without rushing. It lives in the way you listen to water running. Feel the warmth on your hands. Notice the quiet rhythm of washing and rinsing. The mind does not need a special temple to become clear. It needs honesty, attention, and a willingness to be here. And when Zen says, wash your bowl, it is also saying something about completion. Many people move through life half-finished. They eat while thinking of what comes next. They finish work while worrying about the next task. They speak while preparing the next sentence. They arrive at the end of the day and feel strangely hollow because nothing was fully met. The mind was always leaving. It was always halfway gone. To wash the bowl is to complete the moment. To be wholly present with one small act is to stop scattering yourself across time. It is to gather your attention back into one place until you feel whole again. This is where mindfulness becomes practical in daily life. You do not need to meditate for hours to practice Zen. You can practice in small windows, washing dishes, sweeping the floor, making tea, folding clothes, standing in line, walking to the next room. Any moment can become a doorway when you stop dividing your mind. Now you may think, but my days are busy. I don't have time to be mindful with everything. Zen would answer, you do not need to be mindful with everything. You only need to be mindful with something. One task, one breath, one moment. Because the point is not to become perfect. The point is to train the habit of returning. You can begin in the smallest way. The next time you wash your hands, feel the water. Really feel it. Notice the temperature. Notice the sensation on skin. Notice the simple miracle of a body that can sense. The next time you make a cup of tea, listen to the sound it makes as it pours. Smell it. Feel the warmth. The next time you walk, feel the contact of your feet with the floor. One step, then another. You don't need to force the mind to be present. You simply give it something real to rest on. Zen is not asking you to add more effort. It is asking you to remove unnecessary complication. So much of our stress comes from doing simple things while carrying 10 other things in our head. We wash a bowl while replaying an argument. We fold a shirt while imagining tomorrow's problems. We brush our teeth while criticizing ourselves. And then we wonder why the mind never rests. The mind never rests because we never let it be where we are. When you wash your bowl, just wash your bowl. That is not a moral command. It is a gift. And there is another gentle layer in this teaching. When you begin to bring presence to ordinary tasks, you stop treating your life as something you must escape from. Many people secretly live as if the day is a problem to solve so they can reach the night. And then the night becomes a problem too, because the mind carries the day into bed. But when you meet the ordinary with attention, the day becomes less heavy. Life becomes less like a burden and more like a flow of simple moments, each one complete in itself. This also changes how you relate to time. Time becomes less like an enemy. You stop feeling chased by the next thing. Because when you do one thing fully, you are no longer being pulled in 10 directions. The mind becomes quieter, not because you silenced it, but because you stopped feeding it fragmentation. And of course, this is not something you do once and then master forever. The mind will wander, it will rush, it will forget. That's not a problem. That is the training. Each time you notice you are rushing, you can pause for one breath. Each time you notice you are scattered, you can return to one sensation. Each time you notice you are lost in thought, you can come back to your hands, your feet, your breath. Zen does not require you to be perfect. It requires you to be willing to return. You can treat this like training a puppy gently and patiently. No punishment, no drama, just returning. Over time, your mind learns a new default presence. And when presence becomes more natural, stress begins to soften, because stress often depends on absence on the mind, being everywhere but here. So tonight, as you move closer to sleep, you can practice in the simplest way. If you are still awake, feel the weight of your body being held. Notice the slow rhythm of breath. Let that be your bowl. Let your attention wash it gently over and over without hurry. Breath in, breath out. this moment complete. And as you practice this, you may start to notice something else. Many of our habits are actually habits of avoidance. We do not only scatter our attention, we use scattering to escape uncomfortable feelings. We distract ourselves to avoid sadness, fear, loneliness, and uncertainty. We fill every silence because silence might reveal what we have been carrying. So the next step on this path is not only learning presence in ordinary tasks, it is learning the courage to stay present with what is uncomfortable instead of running away. And that is where we will go next, gently, slowly, turning toward the parts of experience we usually avoid and discovering that they do not need to be enemies. For now, let your breath be simple and let your attention be kind. One moment, one task, one quiet return. And in this, you may feel the beginning of a new kind of rest, the rest that comes from being fully here. As ordinary tasks become practice, you begin to notice something tender and important. Much of what we call busyness is not only about schedules, it is also a way of escaping. We don't just scatter our attention by accident. Very often, we scatter it because being fully present can feel too honest. When the mind becomes quiet, what we've been carrying becomes audible. So we fill the space. We reach for the phone. We open another tab. We scroll, check, refresh snack plan, replay, over-explain. We keep the inner room noisy because silence might reveal fear, sadness, loneliness, uncertainty, or grief. It's not that we are weak, it's that we are human, and the mind has learned a simple strategy. If I stay distracted, I don't have to feel. But Zen offers a different kind of relief. Not the relief of running away, but the relief of turning toward experience with steadiness, so it no longer needs to chase you. This is one of the most compassionate truths in Buddhist practice. Pain is not the enemy. The enemy is the fight with pain. The enemy is the extra layer we add panic, resistance, judgment, and the demand that what is here must not be here. When something difficult appears, the mind usually reacts in 2 steps. First, there is the raw experience, a tight chest, a painful memory, a disappointing message, a heavy feeling in the body. That is the first reality. Then the mind adds a second reality. This shouldn't be happening. I can't handle this. This means something is wrong with me. This will never end. That second reality is what turns pain into suffering. There is an old teaching that describes this as 2 arrows. The first arrow is unavoidable. It is part of being alive. Bodies get tired. Hearts get hurt. Life changes. People misunderstand each other. We lose what we love. We face uncertainty. The first arrow lands and it hurts. The second arrow is the one we shoot into ourselves. The second arrow is the refusal, the mental argument, the self-blame, the fear that multiplies the pain, the story that says, "This is unbearable," even when the body could have held the sensation if the mind had not made war with it. Zen practice is learning how to stop firing the second arrow, not by becoming cold, not by pretending you don't feel, not by forcing yourself to be positive, but by staying close to the first arrow with honest attention so it can be felt, processed, and allowed to move. When you do this, the pain may still be there, but it becomes less poisonous. It becomes less personal. It becomes less like an enemy. And this is where the turning happens. Turning toward does not mean you invite suffering to stay forever. It means you stop running in circles, trying to escape what is already here. Because running is tiring, and it never truly works. The feeling follows you into the next distraction, into the next task, into the next day, into bed at night. It waits quietly until you are still enough to feel it again. So Zen says, be still enough now. Not harshly, not forcefully, gently. If a difficult feeling is here tonight, see if you can meet it the way you would meet a tired child. You don't shout at the child for being upset. You don't demand the child stop crying immediately. You sit closer. You soften your voice. You say, I'm here. You let the child feel what it feels while being held by something calm. That is how you meet your own experience. And the body is the doorway for this, because the body tells the truth before the mind builds stories. Even strong emotions, when you bring them down into the body, become more workable. They become sensation movement, energy, warmth, pressure, vibration. They stop being a giant abstract threat and become something you can feel in real time. So tonight, if you notice anxiety, you don't need to solve it. You can simply locate it. Where is it in the body? Is it in the chest, the belly, the throat, the shoulders? Is it tight, fluttering, heavy, buzzing? Does it stay the same, or does it change when you breathe? If you notice sadness, you don't need to explain it. You can feel it. Is it a weight behind the eyes, a hollow in the chest, a softness in the throat? Does it move when you exhale? If you notice loneliness, you don't need to label it as failure. You can feel the shape of it, the quiet ache, the longing, the tender place that wants warmth. This is turning toward. And turning toward is powerful because it removes the second arrow. When you feel sensation directly, you stop feeding the story that says it is unbearable. You stop strengthening the fear that says it will last forever. You allow the body to do what it knows how to do. Feel, process, release. Of course, the mind will try to pull you away. It will say, don't feel this. Fix it. Get rid of it. It will reach for distraction. It will offer you 100 exits. And you don't need to fight the mind for offering exits. You simply don't have to take them. You can return to the breath. You can place one hand gently on the chest or belly if that feels soothing, and breathe as if you are offering the body a quiet signal you are safe enough to feel. You can give the feeling permission to exist for this moment without becoming a problem you must solve. Permission does not mean agreement. It means honesty. It means you stop lying to yourself about what is here. And something surprising happens when you do this. The feeling often begins to change, not because you forced it, but because you stopped feeding it resistance. Like a knot that loosens when you stop pulling, the emotion begins to unwind when you stop fighting. This is why Zen places such emphasis on presence. Presence is not just a spiritual idea. Presence is a form of care. It is the care that says, I will not abandon myself when it hurts. It is the care that says, I can be here for this moment. It is the care that ends the second arrow. So tonight, you don't need to chase comfort. You don't need to scroll your way into numbness. You don't need to outrun your own heart. You can simply breathe and allow what is here to be here, while also knowing that it will change, because everything changes. Feel how the breath moves in and out without asking your permission. Feel how the body is held. Feel how awareness can include discomfort without collapsing into it. This is not weakness. This is strength, the quiet strength of staying present. And as you learn to stay present with uncomfortable feelings, Another doorway opens because one feeling in particular often triggers the mind's strongest second arrow. That feeling is anger. Anger can appear as heat, as tension, as sharp thoughts, as a sudden tightening in the chest. It can feel dangerous, overwhelming, or shameful. And yet, like every other wave, it can be met with awareness. So for now, rest with the breath and let the nervous system settle into this simple truth you can feel without fighting. You can meet discomfort without turning it into war. You can stop shooting the second arrow. And in that steadiness, we will soon turn gently toward anger, not to suppress it, not to justify it, but to see it clearly, so it loses the power to drag you away from peace. As you learn to turn toward what you usually avoid, you begin to realize that emotions are not enemies. They are waves of energy and information moving through the body. They feel intense because they want your attention, but intensity does not mean danger. What creates danger is the way the mind grabs. The emotion builds a story around it, and then acts as if the story is absolute truth. Anger is one of the clearest examples of this. Anger can rise quickly. It can feel hot and sharp. It can fill the mind with certainty. It says, "This is wrong," and the body tightens as if preparing for battle. Sometimes anger is connected to something real that needs to be addressed. Sometimes it is connected to old wounds being touched. Often it is both. But either way, the suffering grows when anger becomes identity, when it becomes, "I am angry, I am this anger. This anger is me." Zen offers a different relationship to anger. It doesn't say anger is sinful, and it doesn't say anger should be indulged. It says, see it clearly, meet it directly. And when you meet it directly, you discover it is not as solid as it appears. There is a small Zen moment that points to this with quiet precision. A student named Jin approached his teacher Roshi Aikan with frustration in his voice. "Roshi," he said, "I try to practice. I try to stay calm. But anger keeps coming. I lose control. I say things I regret. How do I get rid of it?" The Roshi looked at him with a steady kindness. "Show me this anger," he said. Jin blinked. "What do you mean, bring it to me?" the Roshi said. "Show it to me right now." Jin's face tightened. He searched inside himself as if looking for a weapon he had misplaced. But in that moment, standing in front of the teacher, he could not find the anger. He could remember it. He could imagine it. He could think about why it was justified. But he could not produce it as a solid object and place it in the teacher's hands. After a pause, Jin said quietly, "I can't." The Roshi nodded. Then, he said, "You see, when you look directly, it is not there in the way you believe. Anger arises through conditions, and it passes through conditions. You don't have to be it. You can witness it." This is the heart of the teaching. Anger feels solid when you are inside the story. It feels like a single, unquestionable reality. But when you step back into awareness, you begin to see anger as a process, not a permanent thing. A sensation, a thought pattern, a surge of energy, a wave. And just like every wave, it changes when you stop feeding it. To understand this, it helps to notice how anger is built. First, there is usually a spark. Something said, something remembered, something felt as unfair, something that threatens the sense of self. The body reacts, heat rises, the breath tightens, the muscles prepare. Then the mind supplies fuel. It replays the event. It adds judgments. It assigns intention. They meant to hurt me. They don't respect me. This always happens. I shouldn't have to tolerate this. And with each thought, the wave grows higher. Zen does not ask you to deny the spark. It asks you to see the fuel, because the fuel is optional. When anger arises, the first practice is simple: notice it early. Notice the first tightening, the first heat, the first sharpness in the mind. You don't need to wait until anger becomes a storm. If you catch it when it is a small wave, it is easier to hold with awareness. Then bring anger into the body, not into the story, into the sensation. Where is it? Is it in the chest, the throat, the jaw, the belly? Is it hot, tight, buzzing sharp? Does it pulse? Does it move? This is a powerful shift because sensation is workable. Stories are endless. When you bring anger into sensation, you meet reality rather than argument. And then very gently, you name what is happening. Not as identity, but as event. Not, I am angry, but anger is arising. Not this anger is me, but this is a wave moving through. That small change of language creates space. It reminds you that awareness is larger than the emotion. Some Zen teachers describe emotions as guests. A guest arrives at your door. You can slam the door in fear, or you can let the guest in and watch what happens. Letting the guest in does not mean you obey the guest. It means you stop pretending the guest is not there. You acknowledge, you offer a seat, and you observe. When you do this, the guest often becomes calmer because it is no longer being fought. So if anger is here tonight, maybe not intense, maybe just a trace you can practice in a gentle way. Let the breath be slow and steady. Feel the exhale lengthen as if you are making room inside your chest. Feel your shoulders soften. Notice the jaw. If it is clenched, loosen it by one small degree. Then feel the emotion as sensation and allow it to be held by awareness. You are not trying to get rid of anger by force. You are letting anger be honest and letting it pass without building a whole identity around it. You are learning that you can feel heat without burning down the house. And this is important because anger often has something underneath it. Sometimes it covers fear. Sometimes it covers grief. Sometimes it covers hurt. Sometimes it covers exhaustion. When you meet anger with presence instead of war, you create the space for what is underneath to be felt and released. And in that release, compassion becomes possible not only for others, but for yourself. Zen does not ask you to become someone who never feels anger. Zen asks you to become someone who is not possessed by anger. Someone who can pause, breathe, and choose. Someone who can feel the wave and still remain the ocean. So tonight, let this be enough. If you notice a flicker of irritation, meet it with awareness. If you notice judgment, meet it with softness. If you notice heat, meet it with breath. And remember the teacher's invitation. Show me this anger. When you look directly, you step out of the story and into reality. And in reality, everything is moving. Everything is changing. Nothing has to become your identity. As this becomes clearer, another habit becomes easier to see as well, the habit of craving. The mind reaches for relief the way it reaches away from discomfort. It wants sweetness, certainty, satisfaction. And Zen will soon show you that you can taste sweetness without being trapped by wanting. You can enjoy life without clinging to it. You can meet desire without being controlled by it. For now, rest in the breath and let the mind be quiet enough to see clearly. Anger can arise and awareness can hold it. Anger can pass and you can remain. This is the beginning of real freedom. As you learn to meet anger without being possessed by it, another pattern becomes easier to notice. The mind reaches away from discomfort, but it also reaches toward relief. It wants sweetness, certainty, satisfaction. It wants something that will finally settle the nervous system and make everything feel safe. This reaching is natural, but when it becomes desperate, it turns into craving. And craving is exhausting because it makes peace depend on getting what you want. Zen does not condemn desire. It simply shows you how to relate to it wisely. It teaches you how to enjoy what is here without clinging, and how to find sweetness in the present moment, even when life is uncertain. There is an old Zen story that carries this teaching in a way the body can understand. A monk named Sora was traveling alone through the countryside, moving from village to village. One day, as he walked along a narrow path, he suddenly heard something behind him. Heavy footsteps, the sharp crack of branches, the unmistakable sound of danger moving fast. He turned and saw a tiger charging toward him. Fear surged through his body. Without thinking, he ran. The path narrowed, and the tiger gained ground. Ahead of him, the land dropped into a steep cliff. Sora reached the edge with the tiger close behind, and in that moment, the only option was down. He grabbed at a vine growing along the cliff face and swung himself over the edge, hanging in open air above the drop. His heart pounded. The tiger stood above him, snarling its paws, scraping at the edge. Sora held the vine tightly, muscles trembling with effort. Then, as if the moment could not become more impossible, he looked down and saw another tiger on the ground below, waiting at the bottom of the cliff. Above him, death. Below him, death. And in his hands, a single vine. Then Sora noticed something else. Two small mice, one white, one black, were nibbling at the vine where it met the cliff. Their teeth worked steadily, as if time itself were chewing through his last support. The vine began to fray. In that impossible moment, Sora's eyes drifted to the side, and he saw a wild strawberry growing out of the cliff wall, its red surface bright against the stone. It looked ripe. It looked sweet. It looked absurdly alive. Still hanging there, still surrounded by danger, Sora reached out with one hand, plucked the strawberry, and placed it in his mouth. And he tasted it. How sweet, he thought. This story is not meant to teach you recklessness. It is not saying you should ignore danger or pretend life is not painful. It is pointing to something quieter and deeper, even in uncertainty, even in fear, even with conditions you cannot control. The present moment still contains life. And if you can meet the present directly, you can taste it without clinging to it. Most of the time, the mind cannot do this. When danger is near, whether physical danger or emotional danger, the mind runs to the future. It tries to predict. It tries to solve. It tries to guarantee safety. When regret is near, the mind runs to the past. It replays what should have happened. It rewrites. It punishes. And in both directions, the mind leaves the present. It leaves the only place where sweetness can actually be tasted. The strawberry is the present. The tigers are the realities we cannot fully escape: change, aging, loss, uncertainty, the fact that life is not guaranteed. The mice are time, always chewing, always moving. And Zen is asking in the middle of all, that can you still be here? Can you still taste life as it is without pretending it will last forever? Can you still find the sweetness of one breath, one sound, one small moment of warmth? This is the difference between enjoyment and craving. Enjoyment meets what is here and receives it fully. Craving demands more demands, certainty, demands that pleasure continue and discomfort disappear. Craving does not taste the strawberry. It worries about whether there will be another strawberry later. It cannot rest because it is always negotiating with the future. But the monk in the story does something astonishing. He does not deny the danger. He does not escape the reality of tigers and time. He simply does not abandon the present. He tastes what is available. This is not a philosophy. It is a practice. And you can practice it in small ways, even tonight. Maybe you are listening with a mind that keeps drifting to tomorrow. You can return to one simple sweetness, the feeling of the exhale leaving the body, the slight release in the shoulders, the quiet comfort of being supported, the gentle darkness behind closed eyes, the softness of a blanket, the sound of your own breathing. These are not dramatic pleasures, but they are real, and they are only available when you are here. Zen is not asking you to ignore pain. It is asking you to stop postponing life until pain disappears. Because if you wait for perfect conditions, you may never truly live. You may spend your whole life bracing, planning, worrying, and waiting for the moment when everything is finally safe. But life is happening now, in the middle of uncertainty, and the heart can learn to meet it with presence. And this does something very practical. It reduces fear. Because fear grows when the mind insists that uncertainty is intolerable. But when you learn you can be present, even in uncertainty, fear loses its absolute authority. The nervous system learns, I can feel this and I can remain. I can breathe here and I can survive. I can taste sweetness without needing guarantees. This is the deepest kind of relief. Not the relief of controlling life, but the relief of being able to live inside life. So when desire arises, when the mind reaches for something to make you feel better, meet it with gentleness. Notice the reaching as sensation. Is it tightness? Is it restlessness? Is it a pressure to move, to fix, to grab? And then instead of obeying it, immediately return to the present and see what is already here. Often, the mind reaches because it believes nothing is available. But when you look closely, something is always available. Breath awareness, a small softness, a simple calm. This is how Zen transforms desire. It does not crush it. It refines it. It turns craving into appreciation. It turns panic into presence. It turns the search for safety into the discovery of steadiness. And as you practice this, another Zen teaching begins to make sense. One that sounds almost plain, almost too simple, nothing special. Because once you can taste the present without clinging, you realize you do not need extraordinary experiences to be at peace. You do not need constant excitement. You do not need a life without discomfort. You only need to stop fighting the moment and start meeting it. So tonight, let the strawberry be small. Let it be one slow breath. Let it be one gentle exhale. Let it be one soft release in the body. And let yourself taste it fully without demanding anything else. The tigers can be there. Time can be there. Uncertainty can be there. And still, this breath can be sweet. As you taste the sweetness of the present without clinging to it, you may notice something surprising. Peace does not always arrive as a dramatic transformation. Often, peace arrives as something much quieter, the end of struggle. The end of demanding that the moment be different before you're allowed to rest. Zen sometimes calls this nothing special. At first, nothing special can sound disappointing, as if Zen is taking something away from you, but it's doing the opposite. It's taking away the pressure. It's removing the exhausting belief that you must reach some extraordinary state before life can be okay. Nothing special is not dullness. It is simplicity. It is the calm honesty of meeting life as it is, without decorating it, without resisting it, without turning it into a problem you must solve right now. There is a Zen teacher who described practice in a very plain way. We are learning to accept things as they are, not because we approve of every circumstance, but because refusing reality only adds suffering. Acceptance is not passivity. It is not giving up. It is the clarity that stops wasting energy on what cannot be changed in this moment and uses that energy instead to meet the moment wisely. This is a subtle shift, but it changes everything. When we refuse reality, we add a second layer of pain. The mind says, "This shouldn't be happening," and the body tightens. The mind says, "I shouldn't feel this," and the heart becomes ashamed of being human. The mind says, "My life should be different by now," and the present becomes an enemy. Refusal creates war. Acceptance ends war. And notice what acceptance truly is. Acceptance is not a thought you force into place. It is a softening in the body. It is the jaw unclenching. It is the shoulders dropping. It is the exhale lengthening. It's the nervous system realizing it can stop bracing. Acceptance is when you stop pulling the knot tighter. Imagine a rope with a knot in it. When you panic, you pull harder and the knot tightens. When you stop pulling, you can begin to loosen it strand by strand. Many of our inner knots are like this. We make them tighter by fighting them. We make them tighter by demanding they disappear immediately. And then we feel trapped by the very tension we created. Zen offers a different approach. It says, be with it. Be with the feeling. Be with the thought. Be with the discomfort, without demanding that it be gone before you can breathe. That doesn't mean you like it. It means you stop adding fear, shame, and resistance to it. This is why nothing special is freeing. It releases the mind from its constant search for a better moment. The mind is always negotiating with life. If I can just get past this week, I'll relax. If I can just fix this relationship, I'll be okay. If I can just solve this problem, I'll finally feel peace. But when the mind lives this way, it is always postponing life. It is always living in a future that never arrives, because as soon as one problem is solved, another appears. Zen gently says, stop postponing. Stop waiting for your life to become something else. Meet what is here. This moment is not a doorway to life. This moment is life. And the moment becomes lighter when you stop demanding it be extraordinary. There is another way to feel this teaching. Think of how the mind judges itself. Many people carry an inner critic that speaks constantly, often, in a voice that sounds like help. It says, "You're not doing enough. You're behind. You should be stronger. You shouldn't feel like this." The critic claims it is trying to improve you, but it often leaves you exhausted, ashamed, and tense. It turns your inner life into a project that is never finished. Zen does not fight the critic with another critic. It simply sees the critic as conditioned thinking, a pattern, a habit, a voice that arises through causes like weather. When you see the critic as a passing movement rather than the truth, you stop obeying it so blindly, and then acceptance becomes possible. Acceptance means you can be imperfect and still rest. You can be tired and still be worthy of care. You can have a busy mind and still be allowed to lie down in peace. This is deeply healing because so much suffering is not about what life is doing, but about the way we judge ourselves for being human. Zen also holds a quiet truth. What you call obstacles are often the path. The mind wants life to be smooth, but growth happens through friction. A muscle becomes stronger through resistance. A pearl forms because a grain of sand is held inside the oyster. A tree grows deep roots because storms arrive. These are not just metaphors. They are reminders that struggle is not always a sign something is wrong. Sometimes difficulty is simply life shaping you, teaching you, deepening you. But there is a difference between the natural difficulty of life and the extra struggle we add by resisting. Zen does not romanticize suffering. It does not say you should seek pain. It says, stop making pain into a second pain. Stop tightening your whole body against what is already here. Stop demanding that life give you perfect conditions before you are allowed to be at peace. When you stop demanding, the heart opens. Not in a dramatic way, in a quiet way. You begin to notice small goodness again. Not as a reward, but as a reality. You notice warmth in a cup. You notice relief in an exhale. You notice a soft moment of stillness between thoughts. You notice how the body can settle when it no longer has to fight. And this is why Zen's nothing special is actually profound. It is the return to what is real and sufficient. It is the end of the endless search. It is the willingness to live where you are. Tonight, you can practice this without effort. Whatever is here, let it be here. If the mind is busy, let it be busy. If the body feels heavy, let it be heavy. If there is a trace of sadness, let it be present. Notice how the breath still arrives. Notice how awareness still holds everything. Notice how you do not need to solve the whole night in order to rest inside the night. Acceptance does not mean you do nothing in life. It simply means you stop fighting the present while you decide what to do next. It means you begin from clarity rather than from panic. And from that clarity, something naturally begins to rise. When the inner war ends, compassion appears, not as a concept, as a natural warmth, as a tenderness toward your own pain and toward the pain of others. Because when you are no longer busy defending yourself from reality, you can finally see other beings clearly. You can finally feel the shared human experience. You can finally respond without sharpness. So, as you breathe tonight, let nothing special be a gentle permission slip. You don't have to reach a perfect state. You don't have to be extraordinary. You only have to be here and to stop making war with this moment. And as you soften, you may feel the quiet beginnings of compassion, like warmth spreading through cold hands, ready to move with you into the world. As acceptance settles into the body, something gentle happens. The mind stops bracing. The heart stops gripping. And in that softness, a natural warmth begins to appear. Not a forced kindness, not a moral performance, but the simple human warmth that arises when you are no longer at war with yourself. This is why Zen does not treat compassion as an optional decoration on spiritual life. Compassion is what naturally appears when clarity deepens. When you stop using all your energy to defend an anxious self, you have energy to see others. You have space to listen. You have room to care. And Zen is very clear about something that many people miss. Inner peace and outer life are not two separate projects. They are connected. The way you meet your own mind shapes the way you meet the world, and the way you meet the world shapes the mind. If the mind is filled with harshness, your actions will carry harshness. If the mind is filled with fear, your actions will often carry fear. But when the mind becomes spacious, your actions become steadier. When the mind becomes softer, your actions become kinder. Inner work is not selfish when it leads to less harm and more care. Inner work becomes the foundation of compassionate action. In the Buddhist tradition, this is often expressed through the ideal of the bodhisattva, someone who awakens not in order to escape the world, but in order to serve it. Not with grand gestures, but with a steady heart. Not with self-righteousness, but with humility and clarity. Zen compassion is not sentimental. It is not pity. It is not the kind of helping that secretly needs to feel superior. Zen compassion begins with seeing clearly that suffering is shared. It begins with recognizing that every person you meet is carrying something, even if you cannot see it. It begins with the understanding that people are shaped by conditions, by pain, by fear, by history, by misunderstandings, just as you are. When you see this, you begin to respond differently. You may still set boundaries. You may still say no. You may still take firm action when something is harmful. Zen compassion is not weakness, but it acts without hatred. It acts without the extra poison of dehumanizing the other person. It tries to reduce harm rather than multiply it. There is a subtle shift that happens when compassion becomes real. You stop asking only, "How do I protect myself?" And you begin to ask, "How do I meet this with wisdom?" You begin to notice that many conflicts are fueled by the same pattern. Two selves defending their stories. Two minds insisting I am right and you are wrong. Two hearts tightening against each other. When you can soften your own tightening, you become less likely to add fuel to that fire. Zen teaches that when you forget the self, you are illuminated by all things. That doesn't mean you become careless about your life. It means the obsession with self-reference loosens and the world becomes more vivid. You notice other people's faces. You hear what is being said beneath their words. You sense pain behind anger, fear behind control, loneliness behind coldness. And this seeing naturally gives birth to compassion, because it is difficult to hate what you truly see. This is why Zen speaks in paradoxes sometimes. It says that when you stop thinking only about yourself, you become more fully yourself. When you stop trying to secure your own peace through control, you become a safer presence for others. When you stop trying to win, you can finally meet the moment honestly. Compassion becomes less like something you perform and more like something you embody. And it often begins in the smallest ways. A quieter tone of voice, a pause before responding, a willingness to listen without preparing your defense, a willingness to admit, "I don't know," a willingness to let another person be human. Zen compassion is not about fixing everyone. It is about meeting life without adding unnecessary suffering. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is not to solve, but to be present, to offer steady attention, to make space, to let someone feel seen. And this is where inner and outer meet, because the same practice you use in meditation, seeing thoughts, letting them pass, softening the grip, becomes the practice you use in relationship. When someone says something sharp, You notice your own tightening. You breathe. You see the story forming. You soften before you speak. That is compassion in action. It is not dramatic, but it changes everything. Zen compassion also includes yourself. This is important. Many people try to be compassionate to others while being cruel to themselves. They hold themselves to impossible standards, and they live with constant self-judgment. But self-judgment tends to leak outward. A harsh inner voice often becomes a harsh outer voice, even if you try to hide it. So Zen compassion begins at home. It begins with letting your own heart soften. It begins with allowing yourself to be imperfect and still worthy of care. When you can meet your own pain without the second arrow, you can meet other people's pain with more steadiness too. You do not become overwhelmed so easily because you have learned how to hold waves without drowning. You have learned the depth. And from that depth, compassionate action becomes more effective. Because it is not fueled by panic. It is not fueled by ego. It is not fueled by the need to be right. It is fueled by clarity and by a sincere desire to reduce suffering. Zen sometimes expresses this with a simple image. The fingers may look separate, but they belong to one hand. If one finger is injured, the whole hand responds. In the same way, when you truly see the connection between beings, compassion is no longer an idea. It becomes the natural movement of the hand toward what hurts. This does not mean you will never feel anger or frustration or judgment. Those waves will still arise. But now, you will see them sooner. You will be less owned by them. You will have more space to choose. And choice is where compassion lives. So tonight, let compassion be very simple. You do not need to promise yourself you will become a saint. You only need to practice one small thing: soften the tightening. In your body, in your breath, in your mind. Soften it when you think of yourself. Soften it when you imagine others. Soften it when you remember the day. And feel how softness makes you more available to life. Because this is the direction Zen is moving. From the cramped room of self-defense into the wider field of connection. From struggle into acceptance. From acceptance into compassion. And from compassion into action that is steady, clear, and kind. In the next part, we will touch a teaching that protects compassion from becoming rigid or arrogant. It is a teaching about the mind that believes it already knows. Zen calls us back to beginner's mind again, to humility, to openness, to the willingness to empty the cup and meet each moment freshly. For now, rest with the breath and let compassion be a quiet warmth in the chest. Not forced, not performed, just present. When compassion begins to appear naturally, the next question is how to protect it. Because compassion can easily turn rigid when the mind becomes certain, and certainty can quietly become another form of clenching. The mind says, "I know what's right." And without noticing, it stops listening. It stops learning. It stops seeing the living reality in front of it. Zen has a gentle remedy for this beginner's mind, the willingness to meet each moment freshly without carrying the heavy burden of "I already know." Beginner's mind is not ignorance. It is humility. It is openness. It is the inner posture that says, "I may have experience, but I am willing to see what is actually here." Zen teaches that this kind of not knowing is not weakness. It is freedom because it releases you from the prison of fixed conclusions. A fixed conclusion makes the world small. It compresses life into a single story. Beginner's mind makes the world wide again. There is a simple story that Zen uses to make this unforgettable. A respected professor named Dr. Harris once visited Roshi Aiken curious about Zen. Dr. Harris had studied many philosophies and carried a confident sense of understanding. He arrived with questions, but also with answers already forming in his mind. He wanted Zen explained in a way that fit inside what he already believed. Roshi Aiken welcomed him with calm warmth and invited him to sit. Without hurry, the Roshi prepared tea. The kettle warmed, the cups were placed, and the atmosphere was quiet in a way that made the professor slightly uncomfortable, as if silence itself was asking him to slow down. As Dr. Harris began explaining his views, the Roshi began pouring tea into the professor's cup. The tea rose toward the rim and then continued rising. It overflowed, spilling onto the saucer and the table. Dr. Harris watched, confused, then alarmed. "Roshi," he said, "it's full. It's overflowing. No more will go in." Roshi Aiken set the pot down gently and looked at him. "Like this cup," he said, "you are full of your own ideas. How can I show you Zen unless you first empty your cup?" The teaching is simple, but it reaches deep. When the mind is already full, nothing new can enter. When the mind is full of certainty, it stops being curious. When the mind is full of self-protection, it cannot listen. And when the mind is full of concepts, it can miss the direct experience Zen points toward. Emptying the cup does not mean abandoning your intelligence. It does not mean pretending you know nothing. It means you loosen the grip of certainty. You stop using knowledge as a shield. You allow yourself to be taught by reality, not just by your thoughts about reality. This matters because the mind often clings to its opinions the way it clings to comfort. Opinions can feel like safety. If I know what is right, I feel in control. If I know who is to blame, I feel protected. If I know exactly what this means, I don't have to sit in uncertainty. But Zen gently shows that this kind of mental certainty often creates suffering. It creates conflict. It creates rigidity. It creates a constant inner need to defend, to prove, to win. Beginner's mind is the opposite of that defensive posture. It is a soft, alert openness. It is the willingness to pause and say, maybe I don't see the whole picture. It is the ability to meet someone's words without instantly building your counter-argument. It is the ability to meet your own emotions without instantly labeling them as good or bad. It is the willingness to meet a moment without rushing to decide what it means. This is also why beginner's mind supports compassion. Compassion needs openness. If you believe you already know someone, you stop seeing them. If you believe you already know yourself, you stop meeting yourself honestly. You start living inside old labels. Beginner's mind loosens those labels. It restores perception. It makes you available again. You can practice this in a very quiet way. Tonight, for example, you can notice how the mind wants to conclude. It wants to say, "This is how I am," or "This is what always happens," or "This feeling means something is wrong," or "I'll never change." These are cups that are already full. They are conclusions pretending to be truth. Beginner's mind simply creates a little space around them. It says, maybe. It says, let me feel what is actually here. It says, let me stay close to the breath and see what changes. In relationships, beginner's mind can be even more powerful. Instead of meeting someone through the filter of your past experiences, you meet them as they are now. Instead of assuming intention, you become curious. Instead of rushing to blame, you slow down. Curiosity does not mean you allow harm. It means you respond from clarity rather than from automatic reaction. And this leads to a very practical Zen skill, distinguishing reactivity from responsibility. Reactivity is the fast, tight response driven by fear, pride, or old conditioning. Responsibility is the calm, clear response that still acts, still sets boundaries, still speaks truth, but does so without the extra poison of hatred and story. Emptying the cup helps you find that calm clarity because it releases you from the need to immediately be right. It gives you the pause to see what is actually happening. It allows you to meet life directly rather than through the lens of your assumptions. So tonight, let the cup empty in a simple way. Let one breath be enough. Let the mind be curious instead of controlling. Let awareness hold your experience without rushing to name it. If thoughts arise, notice them and let them pass. If feelings arise, meet them with softness. There is nothing you have to prove here. There is nothing you have to win. You can rest in not knowing, because not knowing is spacious. Not knowing is quiet. Not knowing is a kind of peace. And as this openness grows, Zen will soon show you something that changes how reactivity works at the root, the way we assign blame, the way we assume there is always someone steering the collision. When we see more clearly, the fire of anger often dissolves on its own. A single image can do that, and we will move into it next gently, like turning a lantern toward the mind's reflex to blame. For now, breathe slowly and let the cup be empty. Let the moment pour in as it is, without forcing it to fit an old story. And feel how the heart becomes softer when it does not have to be certain. As the cup empties, you begin to see your own mind more clearly. You begin to notice how quickly it reaches conclusions, how quickly it assigns meaning, and how quickly it searches for someone to blame. This is not because you are a bad person. It is because the mind is trying to protect you. It believes that if it can identify a cause, a culprit, or an intention, it can regain control. But very often, this reflex to blame is exactly what turns a small friction into a fire. Zen offers a simple image that dissolves this fire with startling ease. A man named Caleb once spent an evening rowing a small boat across a quiet lake. The sun was low, the water dark and smooth, and the air carried the calm of late day. Caleb moved steadily through the silence, enjoying the stillness, letting the rhythm of rowing soothe his mind. As he crossed the lake, another boat suddenly struck his from the side. The impact jolted him. His body tightened instantly, and anger flared. Before he even turned his head, his mind had already created a story. Someone careless, someone rude, someone disrespectful had crashed into him. Words rose to his tongue. He was ready to shout. But then he looked up. The other boat was empty. No one was inside. No one was steering. It had drifted on the water, moved by wind and current, and collided by accident. Caleb's anger, which felt so certain a moment before, had nowhere to land. It dissolved almost immediately, as if the fire had been starved of oxygen. That is the teaching. So often, our reactivity is fueled not by what happened, but by the story we add about intention. We assume someone meant to harm us. We assume disrespect. We assume the world is against us. We assume the moment is personal. And with that assumption, anger feels justified, sharp, and urgent. But when we see clearly, when we look into the other boat, we often discover there is no one there in the way our mind imagined. Perhaps the person was distracted. Perhaps they were struggling. Perhaps they didn't see us. Perhaps conditions pushed them. Perhaps they were acting from their own pain. Or perhaps it truly was an accident. The point is not to excuse harm. The point is to notice how quickly we manufacture certainty and how that certainty becomes suffering. Zen is not asking you to become passive. It is not asking you to let people hurt you. It is asking you to respond from clarity rather than from automatic fire. It is asking you to separate reactivity from responsibility. Reactivity is fast. It is tight. It rises with heat in the body and urgency in the mind. It wants to punish. It wants to win. It wants to prove. It collapses time, making this moment feel like the whole story of your life. Reactivity usually does not solve the problem. It multiplies it because it adds more suffering on top of the original friction. Responsibility is different. Responsibility is calm enough to see. It can still be firm. It can still set boundaries. It can still say no. It can still take action. But it acts without the extra poison of rage and imagination. Responsibility does not need to dehumanize. It does not need to burn the world to protect the self. It acts cleanly. The empty boat story points to one practical question you can bring into your life before you react. Can you check whether you are reacting to reality or reacting to your story about reality? This is not always easy because the mind tells the story so quickly. The body tightens before you even think. But with mindfulness, you begin to catch the moment sooner. You notice the first surge. You notice the first thought of blame. You notice the heat rising. And in that noticing, you find a pause. In that pause, you can look into the boat. You can ask softly, do I know their intention? Am I certain? Or am I assuming? Is there a chance this is not personal? Is there a chance conditions are moving this moment more than malice? Even asking these questions begins to cool the fire because it introduces humility. It empties the cup of certainty. It creates space for the heart to stay open. And again, this is not about excusing wrongdoing. Sometimes harm is real and must be addressed. Zen does not ask you to become a doormat. But even when you must address harm, you can do it from responsibility instead of reactivity. You can speak firmly without hatred. You can set a boundary without cruelty. You can protect yourself without poisoning yourself. This matters deeply because reactivity has a cost. It lives in the body as tension. It keeps the nervous system on alert. It carries the collision long after the collision has passed. It follows you into the next hour the next day and into bed at night. The other boat might be gone, but the fire remains inside you. Responsibility, on the other hand, can be completed. You respond. You act. You repair if repair is possible. You set limits if limits are needed. And then you let the moment go. You do not keep rowing while carrying an argument in your chest. Zen practice is learning to stop carrying the empty boat. So tonight, as you rest, you can practice this inwardly too. The other boat is not always another person. Sometimes it is your own mind. You collide with a thought, with a memory, with a mistake from the past, and you blame yourself. You assume intention inside your own story. I always ruin things. I'm not good enough. I should have known better. And you become angry at yourself, ashamed, tight, exhausted. But if you look closely, you may find the boat is empty here too. You may find that your past actions were not driven by evil. They were driven by conditions, fear, ignorance, pain, confusion, lack of support, the limits of what you knew at the time. Seeing this does not erase responsibility. It softens self-hatred. It lets learning happen without violence. And this is what Zen is aiming for, learning without violence. Action without hatred. Clarity without rigidity. So as you breathe tonight, imagine the lake. Imagine the calm water. Imagine the collision. And imagine turning your head and seeing the empty boat. Feel what happens in the body when blame dissolves. Feel how quickly the heart softens when it no longer has to fight a phantom enemy. This is a profound kind of relief because it shows you that much of your suffering is not inevitable. Much of it is built from assumption, from story, from the reflex to make things personal. When you see that you regain choice, and as blame falls away, another truth becomes easier to face. Life changes. Everything changes. The body changes. Relationships change. Moments pass. And the more you cling, the more you suffer. So Zen now turns gently toward impermanence, not as a gloomy idea, but as a doorway to love and freedom. When you accept that things change, you stop gripping. When you stop gripping, you can love more honestly. So for now, rest with the breath and let the mind release its tight certainty. Let it look into the boat. Let it see clearly, and let the heart soften into the simple peace of not carrying what isn't there. When the mind stops feeding blame, something quiet begins to appear: softness. The heart becomes less clenched. The body becomes less braced. And in that softness, there is room to see one of the most important truths of Zen, not as a gloomy philosophy, but as a source of peace. Everything changes. This is not a threat. It is reality. And the more clearly you see it, the more gently you can live. Most suffering is not caused by change itself. Suffering is caused by the demand that what changes should not change. We cling to what we love as if clinging could freeze time. We want the pleasant to stay, the painful to leave, and the uncertain to become guaranteed. But life does not move according to preference. Life moves according to its own nature, rising, passing, transforming. Zen calls this impermanence, and rather than treating impermanence as a reason to despair, Zen treats it as a reason to wake up. Because when you accept that everything is changing, you stop postponing love. You stop wasting the moment. You begin to meet life with a tenderness that is honest. There is a small teaching that captures this with the simplicity Zen is famous for. A teacher once held a cup and said, "To me, this cup is already broken." He did not mean the cup was shattered in his hands. He meant he could see the truth of the cup. One day, it will break. It will fall, or it will crack, or time will wear it down. Even if it lasts years, it is not permanent. The cup is already on its way toward being broken because everything is. So he said, "This cup is already broken," and then he added something gentle. And because of that, I love it. When you hold the cup as already broken, you stop taking it for granted. You stop treating it as guaranteed. You feel gratitude while it is still here. You wash it with care. You drink from it with attention. You don't cling in panic, but you also don't ignore the gift. You appreciate it more deeply because you are not pretending it will last forever. This is what impermanence does when it is understood in the Zen way. It does not make you cold. It makes you tender. Think of the people you love. Think of the small, ordinary moments you share. Voices, laughter routines, a message on a phone, a familiar face, a warm meal. a quiet walk. We often live as if these moments are unlimited. We assume there will be more time later. We assume we can pay attention later. But impermanence reminds you softly that later is not guaranteed. And when you truly feel that, you begin to love differently. Not with desperation, but with presence. Not with grasping, but with gratitude. Not with the tight fear of losing, but with the open appreciation of having. This does not mean you will not feel grief when loss comes. Grief is part of love, but impermanence can change the shape of grief because it reduces the shock. It reduces the sense of betrayal. It helps you understand that loss is not a personal punishment. It is part of the nature of life. This teaching also changes how you relate to yourself. Your body is changing. Your emotions are changing. Your identity is changing. Even the parts of you that feel solid, your habits, your opinions, your sense of me shift over time. When you accept that you are not a fixed object, you stop demanding that you remain one certain version of yourself forever. You stop treating change as failure. You begin to allow growth, and you begin to see the self as something closer to a river than a statue. A river has continuity, but it is never the same water. It moves, it renews, it changes shape with weather, with season, with time. You are like that. You are a living process, not a finished product. This is a relief because it means you are not trapped. If you are carrying a heavy feeling tonight, impermanence reminds you it will not stay the same forever. If you are carrying anxiety, it will shift. If you are carrying sadness, it will shift. If you are carrying exhaustion, it will shift. You don't need to force the shift. You only need to stop turning the feeling into a permanent identity. But impermanence does not only soften fear, it also softens attachment. Because attachment often whispers, if I can hold this tightly enough, it won't change. And Zen replies gently, it will change. And then instead of despairing, Zen invites you to live more honestly, to love with open hands. Open hands can still hold. Open hands can still care. Open hands can still protect. But open hands do not squeeze life until it cannot breathe. So tonight, you can practice this in a very simple way. Think of one small thing you normally take for granted: your breath, your bed, a cup of water, the quiet of night, the ability to lie down. Remember softly that none of it is guaranteed forever. And then let gratitude rise, not as forced positivity, but as a natural response to seeing clearly. And if you find fear rising, fear of loss, fear of time, fear of change, meet it the way we have practiced. Feel it as sensation. Let the breath hold it. Let awareness be the ocean. Impermanence is not asking you to panic. It is asking you to awaken to the value of what is here. The already broken cup also points to a kind of freedom in daily life. When something small breaks an object, a plan, a schedule, an expectation, you can meet it with less drama. You can still feel disappointment, but you don't have to turn disappointment into a catastrophe. You can say, of course this changes. Of course this breaks. This is the nature of things. And in that understanding, you suffer less. Impermanence is not a dark teaching. It is a bright one because it returns you to the preciousness of the present. It reminds you that life is not a guaranteed possession. It is a living moment. And the most sane response is not clinging, but presence. As we move forward, this understanding will carry us into the places where impermanence touches the heart most deeply: grief and loss. Zen does not turn away from grief. It meets grief with tenderness and with truth showing you that grief is not a private failure. It is a shared human experience. And in that shared experience, something becomes lighter. For now, let the breath be gentle. Let the body rest. Let the mind soften around the truth of change. And if it helps, imagine holding a cup in your hands, knowing it is already broken, and feeling how that knowledge makes you care for it more, not less. This is the beginning of real love, without clinging gratitude, without denial presence, without fear. When you truly feel impermanence, the heart becomes more tender, but it also becomes more honest. You stop pretending that loss is something that happens only to other people. You stop treating grief as a mistake. You begin to see grief as part of love, part of being human, part of living in a world where everything changes. And yet, even when we understand impermanence with the mind, grief can still feel isolating. When pain is strong, the mind whispers, "No one understands this." It can feel as if you are alone inside a private storm. ZEN does not try to talk you out of grief. It meets grief with compassion, and it gently shows you something that can ease the loneliness suffering is shared. You are not the only one who has lost. You are not the only one who hurts. There is a Buddhist story that carries this truth with quiet power. A woman named Anaya once lost her child. Her grief was so heavy, it made the world feel unreal. She could not accept what had happened. She carried the child's body, moving through the village, begging for someone to fix the impossible. She went from house to house, pleading for medicine, for a miracle, for anything that would reverse death. Finally, someone told her, "Go to the wise teacher. He may be able to help you." Anaya went to the teacher with desperate hope. "Please," she said, "bring my child back. Give me something that will cure this." The teacher looked at her with great tenderness. He did not dismiss her. He did not shame her grief. He simply gave her a task. "Bring me a mustard seed," he said, "from a home that has never known death." Anaya felt a sudden surge of hope. A mustard seed was easy to find. She ran from house to house, asking for one small seed. And everywhere she went, people offered the seed. But when she asked the second question, "Has this home never known death?" the answers changed. One family had lost a father, another had lost a sister, another had lost a child, another had lost a friend. House after house, story after story, the truth was the same. Death had visited every home. Anaya walked through the village. As the sun lowered her arms, growing tired, her grief still present, but now surrounded by the unmistakable reality that she was not alone. By the time she returned to the teacher, she carried no mustard seed. She carried something else, understanding. The teacher did not say, "See, you were wrong." He did not try to win an argument with her pain. He simply allowed the truth to settle. In that truth, her grief did not vanish, but it became less isolating. It became part of the human condition rather than a personal punishment. She began to let go of the demand that life should not include loss. And in letting go of that demand, the sharp edge of suffering softened. This story is not meant to be cold. It is meant to be compassionate. It is showing you that grief is not proof you have failed. Grief is proof you have loved. And loss is not a sign the universe singled you out. Loss is part of life's nature. When you see this, you can stop asking, "Why me?" and begin to breathe inside the truth. This is what it means to be alive. ZEN meets grief in the same spirit. It does not encourage you to suppress sorrow. It encourages you to stop adding a second layer of suffering through resistance and isolation. It invites you to let grief be real while also letting it be held inside something larger, shared humanity, the great web of beings who have loved and lost. There is another Zen moment that points to this in a different way through a simple scene. Two monks were traveling together on a muddy road after heavy rain. The ground was slick and the air was thick with wet earth. As they walked, they came to a place where the path dipped into a deep patch of mud. A young woman stood there unsure how to cross without ruining her clothes. One of the monks, Kaito, paused. Without making a show of it, he lifted the woman, carefully carried her across the mud, and set her down on the other side. She thanked him and continued on her way. The two monks kept walking. After some time, the other monk Ren could no longer hold his discomfort. He had been silent, but his mind was busy. Finally, he burst out. "Why did you do that? We are not supposed to touch women. We have rules. We have vows." Kaito looked at him calmly and said, "I set her down at the river. Why are you still carrying her?" This is another way Zen teaches about suffering. Sometimes the event is over, but we continue carrying it in the mind. We carry the conversation, the mistake, the image, the regret, the judgment. We carry a person who is no longer even there. We carry our grief, not only as love, but as endless mental repetition, endless resistance, endless self-punishment. The body moves forward, but the mind keeps dragging the past. Zen does not ask you to forget what happened. It asks you to stop carrying what can be set down. This is especially important with grief. Grief deserves tenderness. It deserves time. It deserves honesty. But it does not need the extra burden of constant mental struggle. You can grieve and still breathe. You can miss someone and still be present. You can feel loss without letting the mind turn loss into a life sentence. You can hold sorrow with open hands instead of clenching it into a stone. So tonight, if grief is part of your life, whether fresh or old, whether obvious or quiet, see if you can meet it in this Zen way. Let it be present, but don't force it to become larger through story. Feel it as sensation. Allow tears if they come. Allow heaviness if it's here. And also gently notice where you are still carrying what can be set down. Notice the repeated sentences. Notice the harsh judgments. Notice the resistance that says, "This shouldn't have happened," as if reality could be rewritten. You don't need to erase love. Love remains, but you can set down the extra weight. This is not disrespect to the one you lost. In many ways, it is the purest form of respect. It is allowing love to be love without turning it into endless self-harm. It is allowing the memory to be a memory without turning it into a battlefield. The mustard seed story reminds you that grief is shared. The muddy road story reminds you that much suffering is carried unnecessarily. Together they point to a quiet freedom. You can feel what you feel and still release the extra burden. And as you do, the mind becomes simpler. The heart becomes quieter. The path becomes clearer. Zen begins to reveal that the way is not hidden in complicated ideas. It is hidden in ordinary awareness, everyday mind, just as it is without the extra weight of carrying what has already been set down. So, breathe gently now. Let the body rest. Let grief be held, not fought. Let the heart soften into shared humanity. And if something can be set down, even by one small degree, let it be set down on the exhale, as if you are placing a heavy stone on the ground and finally allowing your hands to relax. When you set down what can be set down, the mind becomes simpler. Not empty in a forced way, but quiet in a natural way, like a room after the noise has passed. And in that simplicity, Zen points to one of its most central truths. The path is not hidden in complexity. It is hidden in what is already here. Zen has a phrase that can sound almost too plain: everyday mind is the way. At first, people often misunderstand this. They think it means stay ordinary or don't practice. But Zen is not saying practice is unnecessary. It is saying the way is not found by escaping the ordinary. It is found by meeting the ordinary with clarity. It is found in the mind you already have when it is not twisted by grasping resistance and endless self-reference. This is why Zen so often refuses to give abstract answers. When students ask, "What is the Buddha?" or "What is truth?" Zen answers with something immediate, even mundane, as if to say, "Look here, not elsewhere." The truth is not in the clouds. It is in your direct experience in this very moment. There is a sharp Zen saying that carries this spirit. If you meet the Buddha on the road, kill him. It can sound violent and shocking, but Zen is not encouraging harm. It is warning you about something subtle, the mind's tendency to turn truth into an idol, to chase a perfect image, to cling to an idea of enlightenment, to search outside yourself for a savior, a guarantee, a final answer. Zen says, don't cling to the image, don't worship the concept, don't turn the Buddha into a mental object you chase. Because the moment you chase an object, you leave the living reality of the moment. You create separation. You make the way into something distant. And then you suffer. Killing the Buddha means killing the attachment to the idea. It means letting go of the fantasy that awakening is somewhere far away, or that someone else can hand it to you. It means coming back to direct experience. It means returning to the breath, the body, the sound, the simple awareness that is already present. And this is where Zen's not knowing becomes a gift again. Not knowing is not confusion. It is openness. It is the mind that doesn't rush to conclude. It is the mind that can stay close to reality without trying to possess it. When you relax into not knowing, the mind becomes more intimate with the present. You stop staring at your life through the glass of concepts. You begin to taste life directly. The way the breath feels at the nostrils, the weight of your body on the bed, the faint sounds of the night, the slow rhythm of being alive. Everyday mind is the way means you don't have to wait for a special moment to arrive. You don't need to become a different person to find peace. You simply need to stop abandoning the present moment. You stop living as if life begins after you fix everything. You stop treating the day as a problem to solve so you can finally be okay. You meet the day and the night as they are. This is also why Zen often emphasizes simplicity over explanation. Explanation can become another hiding place. The mind can talk about practice for years while avoiding the actual experience of practice. It can discuss emptiness and compassion and impermanence, but still live with a clenched jaw and a braced chest. Zen brings you back to what is real. It asks quietly, right now, what is happening? Right now, can you breathe? Right now, can you stop adding the second arrow? This simplicity becomes very powerful in daily life. When you feel stressed, you don't need to build a complicated strategy. You can return to one breath. When you feel overwhelmed, you can return to the body. When you feel lost, you can return to one small action done fully. Wash the bowl, sweep the floor, take one step, listen to one sound. This is not avoidance. This is the way. And notice what happens when you stop chasing an ideal. You become kinder to yourself. You stop measuring every moment against a fantasy of how you should feel. You stop turning your inner life into a constant evaluation. You begin to rest inside ordinary awareness, which is much more stable than extraordinary experiences. Extraordinary experiences come and go like weather. Ordinary awareness remains. Zen is not anti-beauty. It is not anti-mystery. But it is wary of the mind that grasps at beauty and turns it into a possession. It is wary of the mind that chases peak experiences and then despairs when life returns to normal. Everyday mind is the way means the normal is not a problem. The normal is the field where awakening grows. So tonight, let the ordinary be enough. Let your breath be enough. Let this quiet room be enough. Let the simple act of listening be enough. You don't have to reach for a distant concept. You don't have to picture yourself becoming someone enlightened. You can simply be present and allow the mind to rest in what is already here. And as you rest in this simplicity, another intimacy begins to appear, an intimacy with the world itself. When you stop obsessing over self and story, you begin to feel the natural connection between you and everything around you. You begin to sense that the boundary between me and world is not as rigid as it seems. The present moment becomes not only quiet, but alive. This is where Zen gently turns toward nature, toward the living world, toward the feeling of belonging. Not as an abstract idea, but as a direct experience of non-separation. When the mind becomes simple, the world becomes close. The sound of wind becomes intimate. The presence of trees becomes comforting. The night itself feels like something you belong to. So for now, breathe softly and let everyday mind be enough. Let it be plain. Let it be real. Let it be the way. And as you settle into that, you may begin to feel the next, unfolding the quiet sense that you are not separate from life, that you are part of a larger movement, and that this belonging can be a deep kind of peace. As everyday mind becomes enough, something very gentle begins to return. It is not an idea you force yourself to believe. It is more like a feeling you remember, an old quiet recognition that you belong to life rather than standing outside of it. The mind relaxes its constant self-concern, and the world starts to feel closer, not louder, not more demanding, just closer, as if the distance between me and everything else had been created mostly by thought. Zen sometimes speaks of non-separation in a way that sounds simple, but reaches very deep. It suggests that the world is not something you are in relationship with, as if you were a separate object looking at other separate objects. It suggests something more intimate. There is no relationship because there are not two separate things to begin with. This doesn't mean you lose your personality or dissolve into a strange concept. It means that when you stop holding the world at arm's length with labels and stories, you begin to feel how naturally connected everything is. You can sense this most easily in nature, because nature does not argue. A tree does not require you to be impressive. Wind does not demand you explain yourself. A night sky does not ask for your resume. Nature simply appears, and it invites you into direct experience. When you are near it, or even when you remember it, the mind often becomes quieter, not because you forced it, but because nature is honest. It does not need your commentary. Even if you are indoors right now, you can gently imagine the living world. A field breathing under moonlight, the slow movement of leaves, the steady patience of stones, the small hidden lives beneath the soil. You might notice, as you picture these things, how the body softens. The breath becomes easier. Something unclenches, as if the nervous system recognizes a truth. It has always known you are part of a larger rhythm. Zen invites you to return to that rhythm through attention, and not just through big, dramatic experiences, but through very small ones. It asks you to notice details the mind usually skips, because the mind is often rushing toward what it thinks matters. But the details are where life quietly reveals itself. The way a shadow sits on a wall, the way air feels against your skin, the faint hum of a distant sound, the way a single breath moves like a tide, the way silence is not empty but full of quiet presence. This is the spirit that Zen shares with the simplicity of a haiku. Not a long explanation, not a grand philosophy, but a direct pointing to what is here. A single clear image, a single honest moment. No decoration needed, just life as it is noticed completely. And when you notice life completely, something tender happens. You stop feeling like a stranger in the world. So much modern suffering is a kind of disconnection. We live inside screens, inside plans, inside worry, inside the endless pressure to become something. We move fast enough that we stop feeling the ground beneath us. We stop feeling the seasons inside our own body. We forget that the same elements that make up forests and rivers also make up our blood, our breath, our warmth. We start to live as if we are separate from everything, and separation becomes loneliness. Zen does not try to cure loneliness with entertainment. It cures loneliness by returning you to direct intimacy with life, not necessarily with other people right away, but with the living reality that you are already part of. Notice your breath. This breath is not yours alone. It is borrowed from the world and returned to the world. Air enters, air leaves. The breath is a small handshake, with life happening again and again without your effort. When you feel that even faintly, you begin to sense that you are not isolated. You are participating. And there is another quiet comfort here. When you begin to feel belonging, you also begin to feel responsibility, but not the heavy guilt-based responsibility that makes you tense. A softer responsibility, a natural care. When you feel connected, you naturally want to reduce harm. You naturally want to protect what supports life. This care is not a burden. It is an expression of belonging. Zen does not demand that you fix the whole world tonight. It simply invites you to notice the world with tenderness. Because attention itself is already an act of care. When you truly pay attention, you stop treating life as disposable. You stop treating moments as trash you rush through. You start to handle the day and the night with more gentleness. This is a kind of hope, not a loud hope, not a hope that denies difficulty, but a quiet hope rooted in presence. It is the hope of choosing one small act of care instead of one small act of harm. The hope of meeting one moment with kindness. The hope of returning to the breath rather than feeding fear. The hope of noticing what is real and responding from steadiness. This kind of hope does not require perfect certainty. It only requires sincerity. And notice how different this feels from the mind's usual idea of hope. The mind often thinks hope means guaranteed outcomes. It wants a promise that everything will be fine. But life does not promise that. Zen offers a more stable hope. The hope that you can meet whatever comes with awareness, with compassion, and with a heart that does not abandon itself. When you are connected to life, you can face change with less panic. You can face uncertainty with less desperation. You can face the ordinary with more gratitude. Even pain becomes more workable because it is held inside something larger than your private story. The ocean holds the wave. So tonight, let yourself feel the simplest form of belonging. Feel the weight of your body being supported. Feel the air touching your skin. Feel the quiet rhythm of breath. Let these ordinary sensations remind you that you are not floating alone in space. You are held. You are part of a living world. Even the darkness is not empty. It is a kind presence around you, like night, wrapping the earth in rest. And if the mind returns to worry about the future, about the world, about your own life, meet that worry with the same gentleness you have been practicing. You do not need to solve everything right now. You can return to one real thing, one breath, one sensation, one small detail. The mind may want to race toward big conclusions, but Zen invites you to stay close to what is true, because what is true is steady enough to hold you. This is how Zen brings you back to the world without making the world heavy. It brings you back through intimacy, through attention, through the quiet recognition that you belong. And from that belonging, you can live with more care, not because you are forcing yourself, but because care is natural when you remember you are not separate. As we continue, we will bring this same attention into a place where modern life constantly steals it. We will look gently at how stimulation and speed pull the mind apart, and how you can return to presence without becoming rigid, creating small islands of quiet, even in a noisy world. For now, rest in the simple feeling of being part of life. Let the breath move like a tide. Let the night hold you, and let the smallest details become enough, as if the world is whispering very softly that you are home. As you rest in the feeling of belonging, you may notice something else with more clarity. Attention is precious. It is the doorway to presence, and presence is the doorway to peace. But modern life constantly pulls at attention the way wind pulls at a flame. Not because the world is evil, and not because you are weak, but because so much of what surrounds us is designed to fragment the mind. Zen doesn't ask you to reject the modern world. It doesn't ask you to live in a cave or pretend technology doesn't exist. Zen simply asks you to see honestly what is happening to your attention, because attention is your life. What you give attention to becomes the world you live inside. Many people now live in a state that could be called continuous partial attention. The mind is never fully here and never fully elsewhere. It is always half checking, half worrying, half scanning. Even during rest, the mind keeps a door open for the next notification, the next message, the next piece of information. This creates a quiet, steady strain in the nervous system. It's not always dramatic, but it is persistent. Like a low hum you stop noticing until the moment it disappears and you realize how tired you've been. Zen returns you to a simple truth. When attention is split, the heart becomes scattered. When the heart is scattered, peace feels far away. And when attention is gathered, the heart becomes whole. This is not about perfection. You don't need to become someone who never checks a phone. You don't need to win against technology. Zen is not interested in shame. Zen is interested in clarity. It simply asks you to notice what happens inside you when attention is constantly interrupted. Notice the subtle tightening. Notice the restless pull. Notice how quickly the mind begins to crave the next hit of novelty, even when you are tired and would rather rest. The mind learns patterns. If it learns that every small gap of silence will be filled with stimulation, it begins to fear silence. It begins to experience quiet as emptiness, as boredom, as something to escape. And then, even at night, even when you want sleep, the mind keeps searching, as if it cannot trust stillness. Zen offers a gentle retraining, small islands of quiet, small windows where attention is not being pulled in 100 directions, not as punishment, as kindness. This might mean device-free moments in your day, a few minutes in the morning before you check anything, a few minutes at night where the phone is not the last light you see, a short walk without audio, just breath and footsteps, a simple meal eaten without scrolling, a shower taken without rushing. These are not strict rules. They are invitations. They are ways of telling your nervous system, you are allowed to be here. And when you create these small islands, something changes. At first, the mind may feel restless, as if it has lost something. That restlessness is not failure. It is withdrawal from fragmentation. It is the mind relearning how to be simple. If you stay gently with that restlessness, it begins to soften, and underneath it, you find something you may have missed: the quiet pleasure of being undivided. Zen would call that pleasure a kind of freedom. Not the loud pleasure of entertainment, but the deep pleasure of wholeness. There is a phrase sometimes used to describe, this attention means attention. It sounds almost too obvious, but it is a strong reminder. If you are listening, just listen. If you are resting, just rest. If you are with someone, be with them. If you are alone, be with the aloneness without escaping it. The mind wants to multitask because it believes multitasking makes you safe, productive, in control. But the cost is often your peace. So Zen asks you to practice single tasking, one thing at a time, not as an achievement, but as a healing. And again, this doesn't have to be extreme. It can be gentle and realistic. You can choose one moment per day where you do only one thing. You can choose one place in your home where screens do not enter. You can choose one ritual at night, perhaps the last 10 minutes, where the world becomes quiet and you let the mind settle without being fed more images. Some people call this a digital fast. Zen wouldn't frame it as a trend. Zen would frame it as care for attention. A fast is not deprivation when it protects what matters. A fast is a way of remembering that you are not owned by cravings and that peace is not found by consuming more. And it is important to be kind here. Many people use phones and screens to soothe pain, to cope with loneliness, to avoid anxiety, to numb stress. If you take away the screen, you may meet what the screen was covering. That is not a reason to keep escaping. It is a reason to go gently, to replace one habit with another form of care. Breath, slow movement, warm tea, a quiet room, a few minutes of stillness. Zen is not trying to make you rigid. It is trying to give you back to yourself. So tonight, you can practice immediately in a very simple way. Let this listening be an island. Let the phone be elsewhere. Let the mind stop scanning for the next thing. Give yourself permission to do only one thing: to breathe, to listen to rest. And notice what happens when you do. At first, the mind may still reach. It may still imagine what it could check, what it could solve, what it could scroll. You don't need to fight that reaching. You can simply recognize it as the same craving we have been discussing, the same impulse to escape the present. You can meet it with softness and then return to the breath, again and again. This is the training of attention, and attention is the training of peace. When attention becomes steadier, daily life becomes steadier too. You begin to notice more. You begin to feel more. You begin to live more fully, not in a dramatic way, but in a grounded way. You become less reactive because your mind is not constantly being yanked. You become more compassionate because you can actually be present. You become more rested because rest finally means rest, not half resting while half consuming. And this naturally brings us to the next place. Zen loves to practice work. Not work as stress, but work as practice. Not effort as tension, but effort as wholehearted activity. Zen has a word for ordinary work, done with presence, simple tasks, simple service, simple care. When attention is gathered, even chores can become calming. Even effort can become lighter. Even the day's responsibilities can be held without bitterness. So for now, stay on this island of quiet. Let the mind be undivided just for this moment. Feel the breath come and go. Feel how the body settles when it is not being pulled in 10 directions. And let yourself drift towards sleep with the simple comfort of knowing that attention can be trained and that peace is not far away. It is often one gentle return away. As attention becomes steadier, the day begins to feel less like a storm you must survive, and more like a sequence of moments you can meet. This is where Zen brings practice into one of the most ordinary, unavoidable parts of life work. Not only work in an office, but any effort chores, responsibilities, caregiving, building, cleaning, creating. Zen does not treat work as something separate from awakening. Zen treats work as a place where awakening is tested, refined, and made real. In many Zen communities, there is a simple spirit of service called Samu. Ordinary work done with presence. Washing, sweeping, chopping vegetables, carrying water, cleaning floors. Nothing glamorous, nothing special. And yet, this is exactly why it is powerful. It trains the mind to stop splitting itself. It trains you to do one thing fully, without resentment, without rushing to be elsewhere. When you bring mindful attention to work, something changes. The work itself may not change, but the relationship changes. Instead of being dragged by the task, you meet the task. Instead of bracing against effort, you breathe inside effort. Instead of turning work into a war, you let work become a rhythm. Zen sometimes speaks of effortless effort. This does not mean doing nothing. It means doing without inner resistance. It means the body moves, the hands act, the mind stays present, but there is less of the extra tension that comes from complaining, judging, and wanting the moment to be different. Effortless effort is what happens when you stop adding the second arrow to a simple task. You can feel the difference immediately. Think of washing dishes. When you wash with resentment, the body tightens, the mind runs, and the task feels heavier than it truly is. But when you wash with presence, feeling warm, water hearing the sound moving slowly enough to be here, the same task can feel strangely calming. The burden was not only the dishes, the burden was the mind's resistance. This is why Zen insists the practice is not separate from daily life. If you can be mindful only when conditions are perfect, you haven't learned steadiness. But if you can be mindful in ordinary work, then mindfulness becomes a real strength. It becomes portable. It becomes something you carry into any moment. And when the mind stops resisting, creativity begins to change too. Creativity becomes less like forcing and more like allowing, less like squeezing something out of yourself, and more like making space for something to arise. Zen often points to this through images from nature. One of the most common is bamboo. Bamboo grows in a way that looks almost miraculous. For a long time, nothing seems to happen above the ground, but below the ground, roots are spreading. The foundation is forming. Then, when the time is right, bamboo can grow rapidly, as if it had been waiting all along. This is how Zen describes real development. Much of your growth is invisible at first. You sit, you return, you soften, you practice presence in small moments, and it may feel like nothing is changing. But the roots are growing. The nervous system is learning. The mind is becoming less reactive. The heart is becoming steadier. And then without drama, something shifts. You respond differently. You breathe where you used to tense. You pause where you used to react. You feel more space where you used to feel trapped. This is effortless effort. You still practice, but you practice without desperation. You do your work, but you do not strangle yourself with urgency. You allow the roots to grow. Zen creativity is like this too. There is a story of a painter named Master Jun, known for painting bamboo. Students watched him for years, trying to learn his technique. One day, a student asked, "Master, how do you paint bamboo? So alive." Master Jun did not answer with a secret trick. He said simply, "Become bamboo." The student was confused. "How do I become bamboo?" The master replied, "Live with bamboo until you know it from inside. Watch it in wind and rain. Watch it in morning light. Watch it in winter. Let it teach your body. Let it enter your bones. Then when you lift the brush, bamboo will paint itself." The teaching here is not about art alone. It is about how skill and creativity arise when you stop forcing and start becoming intimate with the process. When you practice with patience, the action becomes natural. The brush moves without strain. The hands know what to do. The mind is not fighting. The work becomes a channel rather than a battle. This is true even if you are not an artist. It applies to any work you do. When you rush, you break your own rhythm. When you resist, you tighten. When you multitask, you scatter. But when you return to one task with presence, something in you becomes calm and effective at the same time. Zen also teaches that work done with presence becomes a form of generosity. When you wash a bowl with care, you are caring for the next person who will use it. When you clean a floor with attention, you are creating a peaceful space. When you do your job with steadiness, you reduce harm and confusion. This is compassion expressed through hands, not through speeches. So Zen does not ask you to abandon work in order to find peace. It asks you to bring peace into work by changing your relationship to effort. It asks you to release resentment, release rushing release, the mental habit of being elsewhere. And it asks you to practice in small, realistic ways. You can try one simple thing, choose one task tomorrow, and do it with full presence. Not the whole day, just one task. Make tea, fold a shirt, write one email, sweep one corner, wash one bowl. And as you do, keep returning to sensation, to breath, to the simple reality of hands moving. Let it be your practice. And if you notice resistance, Don't judge it. Just recognize it. Then soften and return. This is how you grow roots. This is how bamboo grows. As you practice, you may notice that effort becomes less heavy, but life will still bring challenges that are not solved by presence alone. Illness, fatigue, aging, the vulnerability of the body, and the truth that we cannot control everything. Zen does not turn away from these realities. It brings the same clear, compassionate awareness into them. And in the next part, we will gently move into how Zen meets sickness, aging, and death, not with despair, but with space honesty and a quiet fearlessness that helps the heart rest. For now, let your breath be steady. Let your mind be simple. Let the idea of effortless effort soften you. You do not need to force growth. You only need to return patiently again and again and allow the roots to deepen in their own time. As work becomes practice, you begin to understand something quietly important. Presence is not only for calm days. Presence is for the days that test you. It is for the moments when life feels uncertain, when the body feels vulnerable, when you cannot control what is happening. Zen does not promise that practice will protect you from sickness, aging, or loss. Zen offers something deeper, the ability to meet vulnerability without collapsing into fear. The body is part of life's changing weather. It grows, it strengthens, it weakens, it heals, it hurts, it changes shape over time. Many people try not to think about this because the mind wants permanence. But the body does not sign contracts. One day you feel light, another day you feel heavy. One day you wake with energy, another day you wake with fatigue. And when the body shifts, the mind often reacts with panic, as if change were a personal failure. Zen meets the body with honesty. It does not deny pain, but it also does not add unnecessary suffering. It teaches a simple distinction. There is pain, and then there is the suffering we add through resistance. Pain is the first arrow. The story that says this shouldn't be happening. I can't handle this. My life is ruined is the second arrow. The second arrow is what turns discomfort into despair. This is why Zen practice can be so valuable in illness. Not because it magically removes symptoms, but because it helps you create space around discomfort. When discomfort is surrounded by panic, it feels suffocating. When discomfort is surrounded by awareness, it becomes more workable. It becomes a wave inside a larger ocean. So if you feel discomfort in your body tonight, even a small ache, see if you can meet it without tightening. Locate it. Feel its shape. Is it sharp or dull, heavy or light warm or cool? Does it stay still or does it pulse? Let the breath move around it as if the breath is making room. This is not pretending pain is pleasant. It is allowing pain to exist without adding war. Zen also meets aging with the same clarity. Aging is not a mistake. It is the natural movement of time. The body becomes less predictable, and that can awaken fear. But it can also awaken wisdom. When you stop pretending you have infinite time, you begin to live more honestly. You stop wasting energy on what does not matter. You become more tender with your days. You begin to value quiet moments, simple kindness, the warmth of being alive. There is a story of a wealthy man named Edwin who lived with great comfort. For many years he assumed he had time to enjoy, time to travel, time to fix relationships later, time to rest later. But one day, Edwin received news that his illness was serious. Suddenly, time felt different. The future no longer felt guaranteed, and fear flooded him. He lay awake at night, not because the body was in pain, but because the mind was fighting reality. He was terrified of losing everything. In that fear, Edwin sought out a Zen teacher. He wanted a teaching that would remove the fear, a technique that would guarantee peace. He asked, "How do I stop being afraid of death?" The teacher listened quietly and then said something that sounded strange. "Practice dying before you die." Edwin was confused. What does that mean? The teacher said die to what you are clinging to. Die to the identity you keep defending. Die to the story you keep rehearsing. Die to the demand that life must go your way. If you can let these things die now, while you are still alive, then when death comes, it will not take your peace from you. Because your peace will not be built on what can be taken. This is a profound Zen teaching. It is not about being morbid. It is about freedom. The mind is often afraid of death because the mind is clinging to a fixed self and a fixed future. It is trying to hold life in a rigid shape. But life is not rigid. Life is movement. When you practice letting go in small ways, letting go of resentment, letting go of certainty, letting go of the need to control, you are practicing dying before you die. You are practicing release. And release is what ends fear. This also changes how you meet illness. Illness can feel frightening because it threatens the identity you built. I am strong. I am in control. My body will always obey. When those identities crack, fear rises. Zen does not ask you to pretend the crack isn't there. It asks you to soften your grip on identity. It asks you to meet yourself as a living process, not as a fixed object. When identity becomes lighter, illness becomes less humiliating. You are no longer fighting to protect an image. You are simply caring for a body that is changing as all bodies do. Zen teachers often speak of an old master whose body became weaker with age, but whose spirit became lighter. He was not bitter about aging. He did not pretend he was young. He simply met each day with gratitude, and he used his energy wisely. He spoke less, listened more. He moved slowly, but with presence. His kindness became simpler. His life became uncluttered. This is what happens when you stop wasting your heart on denial. The teaching here is not that illness and aging are good. It is that they can awaken a deeper honesty. They can strip away what is unnecessary. They can reveal what actually matters. And if you meet them with awareness, they can become part of the path rather than a reason to despair. So tonight you can practice a gentle form of fearlessness. Not the fearlessness of pretending you have no fear, but the fearlessness of being willing to feel fear without letting it own you. Fear is a wave. You can notice it in the body. You can breathe with it. You can allow it to rise and fall. And you can remember everything changes, and you can still remain present. This is die before you die in a quiet, practical way. You let go of one tight grip. You release one demand. You soften one fearful story. And in that release, you discover something steady beneath fear. As we come toward the final part, Zen turns toward community and return. Because the path is not only inner, it is lived in the world in relationship, speech, listening, and shared life. Practice is not complete until it becomes compassion in action again and again among other people in the ordinary days. And that is where we will go next, returning to the world with a softer heart and learning how to live this practice in community with gentle speech and deep listening. For now, let the breath be slow. Let the body be held. If there is discomfort, let it be surrounded by awareness. If there is fear, let it be held like a wave in the ocean, and let yourself rest in the quiet truth. Zen offers you can meet change without losing yourself, because what you truly are is not a story. It is awareness steady enough to hold the whole of life. As the mind learns to release its tight grip, something changes in a very practical way. You don't only feel calmer when you are alone. You begin to carry a different quality into the world. A little more space, a little more patience, a little more gentleness. Zen calls this returning to the world, because awakening is not meant to stay hidden in private stillness. It is meant to become the way you live among other people in ordinary days, with ordinary challenges and ordinary imperfections. This is why community matters. In Buddhism, community is called Sangha. Sangha is not only a group of monks in robes. Sangha is any community of practice, any place where people support one another in waking up. Because the mind is shaped by what surrounds it. If you live in an environment of constant reactivity, you will be pulled into reactivity. If you live in an environment of kindness and attention, it becomes easier to remember kindness and attention. Sangha reminds you when you forget that you are not alone on this path. But Zen also understands that community is where practice becomes real, because community is where you are tested. When you sit alone, it is easier to feel peaceful. When you are with people, your patterns appear. Old triggers, old defenses, old habits of blame, rushing, proving, hiding, pleasing. Relationships are mirrors. They show you where you still tighten, where you still grasp, where you still resist. And this is not a failure. It is the practice. Returning to the world means learning to bring mindfulness into conversation, into conflict, into family life, into work, into the small moments where reactivity usually takes over. It means learning to pause before you speak. It means noticing the first tightening in the chest, the first heat of anger, the first rush to defend. It means choosing responsibility instead of reactivity. One of the simplest and most powerful practices here is right speech. Right speech does not mean perfect speech. It means speech that reduces suffering rather than multiplying it. Speech that is honest without being cruel. Speech that is clear without being sharp. Speech that is necessary rather than impulsive. Before speaking, you can ask quietly, is it true? Is it helpful? Is it timely? Is it kind? And even if you don't ask all 4 questions, the pause itself is a practice. The pause gives the nervous system time to soften. The pause allows the cup to empty. The pause helps you look into the boat rather than crashing into it with certainty and blame. And along with right speech is another practice that supports everything: deep listening. Deep listening means listening without preparing your reply, listening without building your defense, listening to understand, not to win. Most conflict is not caused only by differences in opinion. It is caused by feeling unseen, feeling unheard, feeling misunderstood. When you listen deeply, you give someone a rare gift, the gift of being met. Deep listening does not mean you agree with everything. It means you stay present enough to see the human being in front of you. It means you remember the shared nature of suffering. It means you allow the other person to be complex rather than reducing them to a label. This is how the inner practice becomes outer compassion, not as a performance, but as a way of being. Zen also speaks to action in the wider world. Many people feel overwhelmed by suffering. They see social suffering, injustice, conflict, harm. Zen does not say you should ignore this, but it warns against action fueled by rage and self-righteousness, because that kind of action often creates more harm. Zen invites action that comes from clarity, action that is steady, grounded, and compassionate, action that begins with awareness and is guided by wisdom. This is why Zen keeps returning you to the breath. The breath is not an escape from the world. It is a way of meeting the world without becoming consumed by it. When you are grounded, you can respond more effectively. When you are reactive, you often add fire to fire. So returning to the world is not a single moment. It is a lifelong rhythm. You return to stillness, you learn to see clearly, you soften the grip, and then you return to life again and again, bringing what you have learned into speech, into listening, into work, into relationship, into every ordinary moment. And tonight, as you rest, you can feel how gentle this path actually is. Zen is not asking you to become perfect. It's not asking you to never feel anger, never feel fear, never make mistakes. It is asking you to notice sooner, soften, sooner return, sooner. It is asking you to stop abandoning yourself. It is asking you to stop adding the second arrow. It is asking you to open the hand. If you remember only a few things from this journey, let them be simple. You can return to the breath. You can loosen the label. You can soften the tightening. You can look into the boat. You can set down what can be set down. You can taste the strawberry of the present moment. You can wash your bowl. You can meet life with nothing special and find that nothing special is enough. And now, as we come to the end, let the words become fewer. Let silence do more of the work. Let your body sink heavier into rest. Let the jaw soften. Let the tongue rest in the mouth. Let the shoulders melt. And feel how the breath moves without effort, like waves arriving and leaving the shore. If you are listening to The Long Night and this journey has helped you find calm, you're warmly welcome to subscribe so you can return to this space whenever you need deep rest. And if you are already part of this quiet community, thank you for being here. Thank you for practicing with us. In the spirit of Zen, imagine a simple place of stillness. Still River Zen Hall. Not as a real building you must travel to, but as a symbol of the space inside you that is always available. A place where you can return at any time with one breath, one soft exhale, one gentle release. So tonight, let the practice end where it began, with breath, with presence, with the quiet truth that you are already held. Breathe in slowly and breathe out even more slowly. And if thoughts return, let them pass like clouds. If feelings rise, let them move like waves. If the world feels heavy, let it be carried by the earth. You have done enough. You are allowed to rest. Good night, and may you sleep deeply here in the long night.